Today's sponsor is Shudder, the premium streaming video service devoted to horror, thrillers, and suspense. Backed by AMC Networks, Shudder has a growing and dynamic selection of thrilling premieres, originals, and exclusives, including Rob Zombie's 31, The Ring vs. The Grudge franchise mashup, Sadako vs. Kayoko, and Prevenge.
New this week is the Shudder exclusive Nori, The Curse, a J-horror gem from the director of Sadako vs. Kayako. Paranormal expert and documentarian Masafumi Kobayashi seeks the truth behind a string of paranormal incidents connected to the legend of an ancient demon in this lost found-footage masterpiece from 2005, unreleased in the U.S. until now.
Shudder is available on the web, iOS, Android, Chromecast, Apple TV, and Roku for $4.99 a month or $49.99 with an annual membership. But Shockwave's listeners can get a free month by entering promo code SHOCK at checkout. Go to Shudder.com today and find the best collection of horror available to stream
anywhere.
Hashtag Shudder is the shit.
Anywhere. And I just found out that they got the new film from, what is it called?
Ryan's getting frustrated.
No, it's the guys who did Inside.
Oh, they got the...
Livid?
Oh, they got the...
Oh, not Livid.
The one
not
with the kids?
Yeah, the one with the kids.
Oh. I want to say We Are Not Still Here, but it's something like that.
Yeah.
We play games.
Sam and I saw it at, I think, Fantastic
Wait,
Fest.
is it up now?
No, it's coming. I saw them tweet about it.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to
Matt
seeing
Barone had mentioned something about it. Bustillo and Mori.
Yeah.
It is called Among the Living.
Among the Living.
Is it, so it's good?
It is interesting. It's definitely interesting and definitely worth a look. It plays a lot like a Richard Lehman novel, which I think I mentioned when I wrote a review on Shock Till You Drop about it. Richard Lehman was known for kind of telling these interesting, lurid, no-holds-bar horror stories. And he did this one called Traveling Vampire Circus a long time ago. And this kind of reminded me of that, which was like, you know, what studio executives today are so hot on, which is kids on bikes, getting into adventure and horror. And Among the Living is very much that type of film. So it's cool. It's cool. You kind of wonder what the point of it all is, but it's definitely a no-holds-barred, oh, wow, they went there. Really violent. And it's cool. I don't want to give too many spoilers.
And it's been announced
check it out.
just last week, right, that the Chainsaw Massacre, their prequel thing was going to actually come out. Right?
Supposedly in October.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. That was one of the producers just kind of saying,
okay.
Hey,
coming out.
guys. Welcome to Shockwaves.
Episode 53.
I don't think we got that in there.
Shockwave brought to you by The Shudder. Just a giant commercial.
You just listened to Rebecca McKendry, co-host. How are you?
What up?
I'm Ryan Turek. We got Rob G across the table and Elric Kane.
I missed you guys last week.
Disoriented. I've never been introduced from this side of the room.
I know, it's bizarre, right? It just threw off the whole chi for the room, guys.
That's right.
I think it's just we're in shock that you're back and you're safe and sound.
I know. It was definitely an edgy weekend, to say the least. So I was at Phoenix Comic-Con, which I have been doing for like 5 years straight. This was my 5th year at Phoenix Comic-Con, and I have loved this con. I've watched it grow from just kind of a smaller con at a big convention center to now they pack in like over 100 to 150,000 people each time. And it's massive, and it's like San Diego Comic-Con, where by the end of the day on Saturday, you can't raise your arms, and, it's just packed to the gills. Yeah. And Thursday evening, apparently, somebody brought a whole bunch of guns in with the intention of harming the Green Power Ranger who was there signing autographs.
Unbelievable.
I
And
didn't hear that part.
Oh my gosh, it was chaos.
Dark.
So they first made the rule no props or anything like that the next day. And then they put in all of these different security protocols, which of course they need to do at that point. Because the security had been a little lax, way more lax than I see at a lot of other conventions I do. And so then they put in all these security protocols, but it was really difficult for people to get in. But by Saturday, everything seemed to have ironed itself out, security and getting people in wise. But then the rest of the weekend was, there was an undertone of nerd rage, I'll call it, where like people can't get their props in. So it was just kind of like a But people got really creative with it. I do have to say, like, if you can't bring your baseball bat covered in barbed wire for your Walking Dead costume, what do you do? And people were actually getting really creative with it. So
I can't bring my plasma rifle.
but
Damn you.
I know.
Have you guys ever cosplayed? I've never done this. I mean, besides Halloween.
You mean, I was going to say, you mean dress up for Halloween?
No, but Halloween's
Yes.
different. But have you guys ever done it on a non-Halloween time for something like a convention?
No, and I always want to, and I never do. But I honestly, if I
What
was
would you
not,
do?
I don't know. It would
Mistress
definitely be
Becca.
something like it's going to be a character, dumbass.
Well, that
no,
is your
if it's not my character.
That wasn't a character?
Does Ryan Rotten have a costume?
Oh, she went there.
He does. He's called Ryan Rotten Horror Authority. And I did go out as that costume 2 years ago.
But I don't know. I definitely think if I did not work in this industry and I wasn't surrounded by it all the time, I would be the type of person that would spend a lot of time on a costume and really kind of go for it, because I think I would need kind of that creative outlet. And I mean, the costumes I saw, I put up a big article about it on Blumhouse.com yesterday. Some of the most amazing costumes, some stuff I just walk around and I'm like, oh my God, how did you make that? So yeah, it was still like the con, even though that it had that definite bump at the beginning, it still turned out really good. And I met some really good horror fans, some Shockwaves fans. So yeah, it still turned out well.
Well, you came back with a batch full of stickers from Pop Sticker Company. So
Dude, that
thank you
guy
guys for
ruled.
that.
Plus, he kept coming by all weekend asking if I needed food. Because
Ryan
like
handed this straight to me.
Yeah.
I gave
It's
Rob
in
a
Lethal
sticker.
Weapon
old for this shit.
font. I'm too old for this shit.
I really want Rob to just wear that as kind of a billboard hovering above his head all the time. And there was another one that
There's
said
some other good ones in here.
It said
There's-
something about Crom. I was like, Rob
Oh wait,
needs
there's
that
a
one as
put,
well.
put the bunny back in the box. Hand me
Prom
that.
is definitely
Yeah, the Crom is you.
Yeah,
Now, are
there's-
these actually? Can these go in your
Judge
car without ruining
Yeah,
your car? 'Cause I'm
totally.
always-
I've already. He gave us a ghost one, and I've already put the ghost one on
Wait a
my
minute,
car.
there are stickers that don't ruin your car?
Yeah, I put them on the window.
What?
I have an SUV, so I put them on the back. The
And that
back
doesn't
window.
ruin your car?
No,
Oh.
you just use Goo
Yeah,
Gone
usually
when
they're
you
there
take it
forever.
off.
Yeah. I grew up believing that stickers ruined your car.
Yeah, your dad told
There's
you
like-
that so you wouldn't fuck up your '86 Volkswagen Golf. That's all it is.
Yeah,
So-
there's some good sticker mashups. There's the Simpsons dog, but it's actually the Thing.
Yeah.
There is a John Connor, have you seen this boy sticker? It's fun.
Yeah, we got some good stuff there.
yeah.
So I'm psyched. No, it was a really good time. A lot of fun just hanging at the booth, talking with people. A lot of people who approached because they saw a whole bunch of horror stuff at the booth and then were like, what is Shockwaves? So I got to spread the word of Shockwaves.
What
a
is
bit.
Shockwaves, Becca? Tell me. What-
Why, it is the
Shark Tank,
most
someone comes up
awesome
and asks you.
podcast, except for this,
50
like,
episodes in, still trying to figure it out.
there's like this surly Kiwi guy. I don't know
2
what he's
weeks,
doing on
2 days
there,
a
but-
week, 1 day a
I don't
week.
even
I don't know.
But we're still here.
We're
thanks-
still here.
Well, thank
Holding
you.
on.
Thank you, Phoenix, for having Becca.
Yeah.
It was good. Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you for not killing her. We appreciate that.
We do appreciate
That would have been a very depressing episode.
A very, very special
Dramatic.
Shockwaves.
Well, we got a good episode for you today. Unfortunately, Elric and I were not part of the interview coming up.
Seriously, it was like one of my favorite interviews, and you guys weren't even here.
Son of
It
a
was
slackers.
really good. So
He is someone we really wanted to meet. But the cool part is that two of the things I watched this week happen to be
involved with
related,
them.
and
That's
I
right.
hadn't planned that,
That's
so I was very
right.
happy
So it all
about
works
that.
out.
Very thematic.
So I'm pleased.
yeah.
Well, why don't you kick it off?
I'm going to kick it off with not that one for the worst segue ever. Just to totally ruin your segue.
Meanwhile, our listeners are like, Elric, what the fuck?
yeah.
She is so fucked up on this episode, guys.
Yeah, exactly. It's
And I think there's a light burnt out over here, and it's messing me
Yeah,
up
we
even
have
more.
in the
Very
Blumhouse
Blumhouse
conference room,
of you.
there is a light that keeps flickering.
very flickery. Actually, no. I watched the new Australian thriller that everyone that won the festival you went to at the Overlook, Hounds of Love.
Hounds of Love.
And I thought it was a really interesting movie. I particularly liked the performances. I can't say I loved it, but I also think it's not the kind of horror film that wants you to love it. It wants to push your boundaries and the edges. It almost didn't push far enough to me almost at the end. It almost wasn't quite ugly. It's very ugly all the way through, but towards the end, it almost seemed a little easy. But the performances are fantastic. It's basically there is a couple in a car at something that I felt very special. I felt very privileged to know what those girls were playing at the start, where everyone in America is probably going, what the hell are they? It looks like basketball, but they're not bouncing the ball. It's called netball. And in New Zealand, Australia, it's a very big sport, especially for women. They play netball over basketball, and you can't move your feet, so you can't dribble. You have to stay still with the ball, and then you pass. Anyway, I was very excited. So I'm watching netball. I'm watching a couple in a car parked watching young high school girls playing netball. So it's got
Hashtag what the fuck is netball?
Exactly. What is netball? It's very ominous that they're just sitting there watching. But, you could also read it. Oh, are they watching their daughter? It's very quickly they offer a girl a ride who's on her way home. And these aren't like young girls, like children. It's more like, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. They pick up the girl. They say, we'll just drive you up the road. It's a very trusting. This is like I believe it's mid-'80s. It's a very trusting. I know it for a fact because none of us locked our houses. And, this was very common because there wasn't a lot of murders per capita. Anyway, the girl gets in the car and we don't ever see what happens to that particular character again. Then it introduces us to our protagonist, which is a very confident, full of life girl. Really, I like the portrayal of her in the first few minutes that it gave her. It didn't give her a lot. And she's, got a boyfriend and she's who's helping her write an essay. And then she goes home and has a fight with her mom, who's recently separated. And the mom kind of grounds her and isn't going to let her go to a party that night. And she wants to go to a party, of course. It's going to coalesce with these kidnappers. And then it becomes, what you wouldn't want to see, like what isn't popular right now. It never becomes torture porn, but it does the same storyline of what torture porn was doing. Right. And I think it's very evocative the way it doesn't go down the same road. All the things that you're like, now I'm going to see this girl's stripped in a bad rape and it's going to be torture. Somehow it avoids all that, but it still makes you really scared for the main character, what's going to happen. And the relationship's very interesting to watch.
Is it still just as ugly as a torture porn,
Not
even
quite.
without that?
It's the buildup of the ugliness, but they find a way to make it more about the character. It's basically about the girl trying to figure out the relationship of this couple who are holding her, like especially when it's a couple. So it's not just the guy, it's the guy and the wife, and what are their psychological makeup that gives her maybe any chance of escape. Like what would she have to do as part of this threesome, in a sense. Right. And it's disturbing. It's definitely not for everyone. As I was watching, it's like, this is. I was kind of surprised it won a major festival, even though it's a really well-made movie, because it is not a crowd pleaser in my mind, and it makes you feel kind of, makes you not feel great. But I did think it was a particularly well-made film, and I think people, some people, this is going to be right up their alley. Other people who are, I actually thought of Rob a little bit. People who don't like home invasion movies or horror that's too real. This is definitely, if I had a daughter, I probably wouldn't be rushing to watch this movie.
Oh, wonderful. That's on my slate for this week. That filmmaker, Ben Young, has already graduated to a big studio film. He's doing a movie called Extinction for Universal. And
it's a good choice. He definitely knows how to put this movie together, and the performances are great. Yeah. It's just, that kind of material is always hard,
Yeah.
And so where did you see Hounds of Love?
That one is on Amazon Prime. I paid for it. So it's a brand new release.
You didn't pay for it.
Oh, it's not Prime. It's for
it's VOD.
Yeah, I just call everything my Amazon Prime.
I know, even if you have to pay for it.
Yeah. But it was a brand new film. I was excited. Again, this is the times where I am excited because I just heard about it Overlook, and I was like, oh, cool. Now I'm already able to see this. I don't know if it mustn't have gone theatrical, but
no,
it must have played well there, though.
It did. That's what I heard. A lot of people came out and they were raving about Hounds of Love. It also played, I believe, at another fest, I think, and it did really well. So, yeah.
Cool.
I still have to check it out. Rob?
Let's see. So, as a lot of you know, as I've mentioned on the show previously, I have a little bit of a blind spot when it comes to Hammer horror, but I have quite a couple box sets and scattered things. So, once in a blue moon, I'll pop one out and be like, oh, let me check this out. So, I just watched from 1960. It's The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll. And this was directed by Terence Fisher, who directed quite a number of these Hammer movies. Some of the best. And in fact, this one had come out from Mill Creek it's a pretty cheap double bill on Blu-ray, meaning that it's just the movies. There's no subtitles or anything or features. But it looks really great. And it's on a double bill with The Gorgon, which I have yet to watch. But I don't know. I not only do I have a blind spot in Hammer, but I don't know a lot of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde stories. So I was like, oh, let me check this one out. And quite frankly, I loved it. Loved it. Like, this is up there now in terms of this and another Terence Fisher movie. He did the 1962 Phantom of the Opera, which these are now my two favorite of the Hammer movies I've seen thus far. And I think the main reason, the thing they both have in common is they take the general idea of what those monsters are and completely do something I didn't expect with them. So for this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll is actually like a kind of a nebbish, nerdy, somewhat ugly scientist. He's like a guy with a weird, grotesque beard and all that kind of stuff. and he's got a wife who is having an affair with a guy named Paul Allen, not of American Psycho fame, but instead played by Mr. Christopher Lee. So she's having an affair, and he does this experiment, and basically his Mr. Hyde is this really suave, great-looking version of him. So it's the complete opposite, where when he becomes Mr. Hyde, he actually becomes this very confident, somewhat womanizing and deep under the surface, violent guy. And he immediately befriends Christopher Lee as this other character, as Hyde. He tries to seduce his own wife, I thought it was just so well executed and so well done. And again, much like Phantom of the Opera, which he wasn't really the villain in the 1962 one, I just like the idea. It's like, oh man, I never thought of like Mr. Hyde you always assume Mr. Hyde's going to be the monster. And instead they went the complete opposite and just made him like, this good looking, that's the more dangerous guy. So I really loved it. And, it's only like $7-8 on Blu-ray for this double bill.
Wow.
Huh.
So strongly recommend it. The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
Becca.
Yeah, I was sitting at a booth for much of the weekend, so I would gradually go around the con and pick up a new comic book every couple hours and then read the comic book. So I ended up reading a ton of graphic novels while I was there.
Reading?
Reading! I know. Well, I watched
Los Angeles.
I watched a movie, but I was going to save that one for the next round. Okay. But yeah, so some of the stuff that I read, the first one was actually emailed to me. It has not been released in the U.S. yet, but I swear it's like the greatest thing that I've read in a long time. It's called The Promised Neverland. And it was sent to me by one of our listeners, Jacob Davidson, who knew that I had gotten really into Junji Ito and said, you'll like this. And it's awesome. There's like 40 chapters of it so far. I think I'm on 24. And I can't wait to go home and read more. And it's just about a group of kids at an orphanage who discover, and this isn't blowing because it happens really quickly, they discover really quickly that they are there for meat. They are providing, they themselves are meat for this race of monsters. But that's all in the first book. And remember, there's 40 more to go. So there's a ton more that happens. But the majority of it takes place at this orphanage. So it's really contained, but there's a lot to it. And so I'm just absolutely in love with this. It's coming stateside in December. It's doing a US release. But right now you can find online copies of it for purchase on some of the comic sites. And I highly recommend Promised Neverland.
Nice.
So yeah, that was awesome. There's this book that everybody was freaking out over while I was there called My Favorite Thing is Monsters. I just picked up my copy and started reading it a few minutes right before I got here.
I through that a little bit just to look through it. It looked cool.
It looks beautiful.
Is it all art? I would just look through a few pages.
There's a story.
Okay.
There's a story in there as well. And it's these hand-drawn monsters. Yeah, it's all written on notebook paper. It looks like a journal. And so that's absolutely beautiful. I also just started this thing called Moonshine, which I think was Image Comics. And it's about, it's set in the 1920s and where I'm from, Appalachia.
I figured you said moonshine.
And it's about a group of FBI agents that are sent in to break up a moonshining ring, and they discover that it's actually got this crazy supernatural twist to it. And so I've been absolutely loving that. And so I read a ton of graphic novels while I was there.
I want to do a quick pitch for somebody who is a previous guest on our show, Mrs. Bria Grant, because I couldn't find a better segue. Today I found out that she is starting a new podcast called Reading Glasses, and it's all about reading and books. And I actually saw it and I started reading their little blurb. I'm like, that looks like a cool podcast. So I'm giving them, this is probably the perfect opportunity.
It's Bria
to
and
plug.
Mallory.
Yeah, Mallory. Yeah. And that sounds like a really fun idea, but because Bria's been on our show, I thought it'd be a good time to interject.
Absolutely. And my favorite thing is Monsters was picked up by Sony.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
that was quick, too. That literally just came out last week. I think it'd gotten a lot of hype around it, but all of the vendors at Phoenix Comic-Con sold out of that on the first day, and then there were literally just people walking around asking if you knew where you could find a copy.
Interesting.
And the other thing that I was alerted to, which apparently if you were 10, you've known about for months now, is this game called Bendy and the Ink Machine. which everyone there was cosplaying as and looking for merch for Bendy and the Ink Machine. And then I brought a little sticker that somebody had given me home, and Marnie literally looks at it and she goes, "Oh, that's Bendy and the Ink Machine. The kids talk about that at school all the time." And she's 4. And
it looks weird. It's like some like retro animation
It's
thing.
really cool. It's as if
I can't play it on my phone though.
Oh
Can you?
no, I've been playing it on my computer, like my Mac. But it's as if, and I mean, it definitely is. It's like Five Nights at Freddy, where it's really scary, but it's definitely geared towards a younger generation.
Right.
So it's pretty PC. But yeah, it's like if Walt Disney was designing Mickey Mouse, but he'd gone like totally satanic and taken over the studio.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So it's like it's animated, but it is. It's really scary.
Who says Walt hasn't gone satanic?
Yeah. So.
Nice.
Our recording engineer had to leave the room while books were being discussed. He's like,
Ernie doesn't do books.
He's like, movies are back. All right, I'm back.
So I gave David Fincher's The Game a revisit.
Hey.
David Fincher's,
thumbs up.
this is the film that came out 2 years after Seven, came out in 97. And, you know, a lot of reassessment on this. I think that after the kind of hard-hitting, bleak nature of Seven, you know, me being a film student at the time, I was super psyched to see what David Fincher was going to deliver next. And I had really high hopes. And then when I saw it in theaters, I was like, oh, okay. I thought it was a little, I didn't think it was as complex as Seven.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't, it just wasn't as sophisticated as Seven, even though it tried to be.
But it's so fun.
It is fun, and
I
it's
love it.
beautifully made, And the whole reason why, obviously, I threw it on is my girlfriend has been on a bit of an immersive gaming kick. I might lose her to it in about a month. But we gave it a revisit, and I found the kind of journey still being enjoyable, but it still left me like dead inside. Like I was still empty, you know? And a little bit of history on the film, if you guys don't know, you know, Fincher teamed up with these two writers, John Procato and Michael Ferris. They're the duo who gave us Sandra Bullock's The Net. They wrote Terminator 3. They wrote the Bruce Willis movie Surrogates. But, Becca, they also wrote Mind Warp and Severed Ties.
Oh my gosh.
Fango movies.
Yeah, those are two
Yeah,
Fango
and they
movies.
also wrote...
I actually really like Mind Warp. It's got Bruce, dear Lord,
That's the Bruce Campbell movie.
Bruce Campbell,
Oh,
thank
Bruce
you.
Campbell.
Sorry, I'm sitting here and
They're
I'm
like on a different
Bruce,
kick.
guys, Bruce.
So they're responsible for the excellent dialogue by Sean Penn, one of my favorite lines of movies, which is, they fuck you, and they fuck you, and then just when you think the fucking's over, that's when the real fucking begins. I love Sean Penn in that movie. And
He's
his
good.
role, love him. And it was meant to be Jodie Foster to play the daughter of Michael Douglas, and he was so insulted that of the age thing that he's like, no, that can't happen, got rid of her. I was like, that's kind of funny.
Interesting. Well, just to recap a little bit of the plot, Michael Douglas plays this kind of wound-type rich banker who still lives on his family estate. He's got a history with his father. His father committed suicide. His brother is Sean Penn. And on Michael Douglas's birthday, Sean Penn comes to him with a birthday gift in the form of The Game, which is this very expensive immersive gaming experience.
And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the birthday he's celebrating the same birthday that the father would have committed suicide? Like, I think there's a reason why this was important.
It's the same age, exactly.
Yeah, so it's like
they're hitting the same. It's the same age, and so you've kind of got that tooling around the back of your head. The whole point of getting into this game is just to give Michael Douglas's character a break from the norm. He's, like I said, he's very wound tight. He's got very particular ways of doing things. He's kind of a cold character, and it's just like a break from his lifestyle. And then by throwing him into the game, he starts to meet eccentric characters, and he winds up in Mexico at one point. He comes home one day and he finds this weird clown doll sitting in his lounge that's got a camera in it, and the TV pops on, and instead of like a CNN business report, like the news anchor starts talking to him.
See, that sounds like it should be awesome, but I remember
is
seeing
awesome.
this like a couple of years
best
ago,
movies ever.
and I
Love that
don't
film.
remember this scene.
Yeah, it's cool. The journey along the way is interesting, but Elric, at the end of the day, though, like there's no stakes. The stakes are not
The
high.
stakes are his life. They're doing it because otherwise he might
But
die.
at the second he commits to this game, you know that there are no stakes, and everything along the way, he's going to be completely fine. And in retrospect, if you look at the film and you revisit it again,
Okay, yeah, I haven't seen
you
it.
watch the film and you go, I know he's going to be fine. Like, I don't want to spoil the journey along the way, but there's just there's no real life or death stakes.
I'd have to watch again to know if I feel that way still. But
yeah, there's
I loved
the
it at
kind
time.
of like there's false stakes and there's things that along the way that he'll be fun.
But don't you really know that in every movie ever, except for like things like Psycho, like movies that
No,
fuck
not from
the trend?
David Fincher. Not a David Fincher movie. Not a David Fincher movie. He just fucking showed me that Gwyneth Paltrow's head's in a box.
Yeah, but she wasn't. I mean, Brad Pitt's wasn't. So
But
I mean,
think
Gwyneth
that
Paltrow.
Even still, you go back through the motions, like the emotional pull.
Yeah,
with
but
the
even
characters.
still, you look at Michael Douglas's arc in it, and there's this kind of like, will he or won't he go down the same path as his father?
Yeah.
And that's something to be said.
I think
and
aren't the
that's something
stakes.
to
I would say
remember.
from my first viewing of the movie, it's probably different a second time because you know the story. But the first viewing, I thought the stakes were more about, is this real or is this a game?
yeah,
and
that's
if
the
it's
whole-
real, he could actually die when that taxi goes underwater. The guy could drown or whatever.
Right.
So I remember that being the fun. I just remember it being the most fun. His use of his talent, Fincher's talent, to create these incredible set pieces that you're like, oh fuck, like all these crazy things. And I enjoyed the ending. I remember it being a really fun, smart ending. So
no, absolutely. I just feel like on the grand scale of what Fincher has given us, it's kind of on the lesser end.
I put it in the top three. I mean, because I think
Really?
Zodiac's still the best, and Seven's right there with it, and then Game, because the others around that are okay.
Yeah.
Zodiac is
Zodiac's a
about to be
masterpiece,
streaming again on Netflix. It comes
cool.
next week.
I'll
I
have to
think
give
it
that a
comes to
revisit
Netflix.
because I haven't seen that since opening night either.
Yeah, that's tense.
Anyways,
That's
that
my
was
favorite.
Yeah, it's a great
Yeah.
movie, man.
that was the game.
Yeah, that's cool.
Elric.
Oh yeah. Oh wait. Oh yeah. That's right. We're going. This is the weirdest.
I'm so confused by
we're
all of
ping-ponging
this.
around. This is
all,
the
all these
X-formation,
games
guys.
that Ryan's playing now have created this weird pattern. Okay, well, let's dive into. First, this is a quickie. I'm not going to go into it, but just to echo what Rob said, if you haven't done the water cooler event of right now on
right
Netflix,
now.
The Keepers literally felt to me like pulverizing my heart. Each episode.
Wait, I have not done this.
Yeah, I mentioned it last week.
Yeah.
It's a new 7-part documentary series.
Yeah, I
on
haven't felt
Netflix.
like that since there was a Dear Zachary, a documentary I saw a couple years ago that just devastated me. This is more like death by increments. The first episode's pretty, like you said, it's good. You're kind of hooked by the story. Oh, who killed this nun? And then second episode opens up like the fucking hellhole that you fall down and go, oh my god. I don't believe in evil. It's like something I've come to in my life where I try not to believe that somebody could be born evil. I like the idea that humans make choices and then do things in psychological and birth.
Nope.
In this
Episode
movie,
2,
there is a
evil.
person that you just can't shake what they're capable of doing, and you can't understand it. And it's just a remarkably dark thing, but it's also really kind of fun in one sense, which is that these older women, they're like in their late 60s, who were students of this nun, who are now old women, are trying to solve a murder, and they're obsessed because they cared about this person. And I found that to be a very, that to me was really beautiful in a sense. So it's an excellent series.
Does this work like Making of a Murderer?
It's got the same
or is
addictive
it-
thing. It's better made. Like Making a Murder is just addictive because the story's great. This is brilliantly directed. This guy whoever made this could just go straight into a horror film because some of the recreations and imagery they create is scarier than that. What's that documentary? Me and you were both the Slender Man. We were both cool on.
Yeah.
I felt like that Slender Man didn't do that for me. This
I was
has
like
moments of
lukewarm
that.
on the Slender Man
Yeah,
doc.
it
Like
just
it
didn't-
was
It could have
interesting,
been half the
but
length.
yeah.
This is really, really worth your time. I think it's kind of important, especially if you have kids or something. I think it's important to see because you realize what institutions and people are capable of, and you have to look after your fucking kids.
well,
You have to
people in
know what's going
authority.
on. Yeah, it's freaking terrifying. So that's I'm just reiterating what you said, but let's just jump into my Cunningham connections. Unwittingly, we jumped in. I was watching with a friend of mine. I watched House 1 and 2 for the first time. I have not seen House since way back when I saw it, and House 2 I did see theatrically when I was young, and I once met Bill Maher, and just as they're taking a photo of me standing next to Bill Maher, this like 15 years ago, I put a cowboy hat on his head and said, "Love you in House 2," and he has this expression on his face of just wanting to kill me, and I'm like 21, I'm a total asshole. I thought House 1 was so much fun, and I loved almost everything about it. I think it's a scary story. I think I have my new after Coscarelli. I think Miner might be our great Moby Dick for the show, because you think about how many franchises he has a major role in shaping what they became. Obviously Friday, but just it makes me go, and he never talks about this stuff. So I'm like, but I think his direction's brilliant. I think the weakest parts now, which were effective when I was a kid, were the Vietnam sequences. Because now they feel like they just shot them in the backyard. Sure. But the actual house
I'm
stuff
pretty sure they did actually shoot
I'm
them in
sure.
the
I'm sure.
backyard.
Yeah. But once he turns into the skeletal thing, it's awesome. Big Ben's great, but it's a really fun movie, and all the gags are great. I had a blast. House 2 was probably the worst film I've seen this year, or in many years, or many years.
No
easily
fun,
since
Elric.
Microwave Massacre. I did not enjoy a single second of that movie. And,
House 2?
and in
Oh,
theaters,
my God.
I remember being very disappointed by it, but like thinking it was funny. Actually, no, that's a lie. When Cliff from Cheers comes in, I do have fun for a couple scenes. He is fun. Everything I liked about the first, it probably was magnified watching them back to back, but like nothing. I mean, and me and I was watching with Dick, we looked at each other and went, wow, that is they're
Dick?
lucky they put it in a box set because I would never watch that movie again.
I got to agree with you because obviously we went through the whole box set, and I have fond memories of 2, but revisiting it right after 1, I liked it less than I ever have.
Okay, I got to
why.
revisit because I just did 1 a couple of weeks ago, but I stopped there, and so now I'll have to do 2 for next
Guys,
week.
it's not Microwave
And
Massacre.
Norm, how great is Norm in part 1? Norm is so
Oh,
great.
he is so great
he's
in
so
that.
fun.
That's the thing about the part 1 is everybody sells it.
Yeah.
You know, George Wendt, William Catt, they sell it. Even William Catt's...
It's an emotional story because they've got his kid, but then you come to the second one, you're like, what is the story? Like, why is his girlfriend or wife just left and no one can... We talk about stakes from the game. This movie had 0 stakes, and I didn't even know what the point... Now, the old guy, the Frighteners, the old Western ghost kind of ghoul was kind of cool because there's a couple cool touches, and definitely the stop motion Harryhausen type stuff. That's super cool, but you're like, wow, it's so wasted on this kind of bizarre. And then when you if you watch the extras, you'll hear the writer saying you get why it changed so much because I think Decker had you, instead of giving it to the other screenwriter to direct, had given this to Fred Decker to direct, you probably would have had a gangbuster sequel.
Sure.
But what
Yeah,
can you,
I agree.
But House 1, if you haven't taken the trip back, I think I liked it even more than I did when I first saw it. I thought it was just a totally fun movie to watch.
Yeah.
Oh.
Who's up now?
It's you, Rob.
Has everyone seen, or has anyone seen Psycho Cop Returns? Because I've been meaning to talk about this one for weeks.
Last night I watched it because of you, because I knew this was coming.
Well, here we go. So this one I got from
Here we-
Vinegar Syndrome. And I was jealous because I saw you post a picture that you bought it, Elric, and I was
Great
like,
cover.
I need to see this.
The cover was really good.
And I talked a little bit with Ryan about it over the weekend because Ryan was like, wait, there's a part 1? And I'm
I
like,
had no
yes,
idea.
this is a sequel.
No idea.
Yeah.
I just thought it was like one of
apparently-
those weird one-off, like, hey, we're just having fun.
When did Psycho Cop come out?
I don't know. Let me looking up because my memory is that Psycho Cop was 1989, and then this one's 93.
So is it a Maniac Cop like knockoff? Or
I mean, we don't know the origins because we've never seen Psycho Cop,
Yeah,
but
I
in this
don't
one
know
he's just
how-
already Psycho Cop.
Yeah, I don't know how hard it is to get Psycho Cop, but the synopsis on IMDb is 6 college students on their weekend vacation are humiliated and killed one by one by a psycho cop.
That's it.
That's really all you need.
That's it in a nutshell. That's literally the movie.
Yeah.
But then Psycho Cop Returns.
Adam Rifkin directed, which I did not know until I turned on.
Well, yeah, because he does it under a pseudonym as Riff Coogan. And actually, one of the fun things about this, so Adam Rifkin is the one that directed this. One of the fun things is the documentary on the disc because he kind of talks about how he created this Riff Coogan personality because it's like he wanted to write these big movies for like Joe Dante, like Small Soldiers or whatever, but he wanted to do like cheesy, smutty horror movies too because he grew up loving it.
How have we not had him here?
I know.
Yeah.
That seems
Ah.
crazy.
Great.
We should get Adam on.
So this is it's funny because of course when I think of a Psycho Cop, I think of Maniac Cop.
Yeah.
And those are a completely different tone of movie. Yeah. This is more like early goofy 90s horror with, the guy that plays the main cop, what's his name here? Robert Schaefer, who ended up being a regular on The Office.
My theory is that guy sat in a room and watched Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 100 times. I want to give a performance exactly like... He even does the laughing thing as he walks away.
Yeah.
And that was hard for me to get into the movie because, I can't say this one was for me. I was watching, especially alone. I think if I'd watched this with a group of people, I would have laughed a lot more.
Yeah, group. It might be more of a group movie.
Yeah.
But, it's funny. It's like a bunch of guys in an office building that are having a bachelor party.
It's a bachelor
at their
party.
work.
Which is, the reason for there to be naked
Playmates
strippers
and,
the whole
Julie
movie.
Strain,
I thought they
baby.
were-
Julie Strain.
Oh, this is the return. I'm sorry. I was like, I
Psycho
thought they
Cop
were
Returns.
6 college students, guys. No, that's the first
nobody
one.
knows about Psycho Cop 1.
Okay.
What is
But
I don't even know if it exists.
The acting style of the guys at the bachelor party is probably, because they're instantly in the movie, is probably what kind of turned me off initially because it's just so big. It kept reminding me of Darkman, of what side characters in Darkman are like.
I
It's
think
like,
Rob
what's going on here?
I think Rob actually mentioned like Ted Raimi could have filled the shoes of that.
He was
totally
like a
built
poor
that way.
man's Ted Raimi.
Yeah, totally.
The lead
Just
guy.
had these every grimace he made with his mouth.
Yeah.
He was just like you just expected drool to come out of it.
Yeah.
It's a weird movie. I told Rob, it just reminded me of the fodder I would watch on USA Up All Night, hosted by Rhonda Shear. It would be like I'd watch it and then go, oh man, I really need to see this uncut because they're cutting out the boobies.
Yeah.
And then I'd go and sneak a VHS copy, throw it under my bed, and watch it later on. It's pure, just sleazy, violent spookiness.
It's like early 90s trash.
Yeah.
I need to see this now, guys.
No, you do. You do.
It sounds like something I would like, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a fun, like, party movie. And I mean, it's like everything that we would have loved as a 12-year-old.
Totally,
where it's like,
that would have been enough.
It's one-liners and naked chicks the whole time and gory kills. So it's like kind of a teenage boy movie.
I think one of the problems with great packaging sometimes is that packaging, like, I was like, oh shit, it looks great.
Right.
And then even thinking about Maniac Cop 2 got me excited about this movie. And I think that's part of it. I am thinking too much about Maniac Cop when I was watching
and it's a totally
different
different
It was hard to divorce
animal.
yourself. And so it didn't really do it for me, but I also think people could have a lot of fun with it. I think that's just a taste thing.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it when we talked a couple of weeks ago about Demon Wind, which had that amazing cover. Like me and Josh Miller have decided, like, it's like, let's remake movies with amazing covers and actually put that cover monster in it.
I actually saw a VHS with the lenticular, I'm going to say that wrong, lenticular cover at Phoenix Comic-Con, and I almost bought it for you, Rob. And then I was like, he has the fancy copy
like
now.
Demonoid has the greatest poster cover image ever, and then you watch the movie and it's so boring.
The one that I always liked is it was like a Lovecraft one called Bleeders, and it had these monsters, but the cover was full of blood. And I still have mine. It's squishy. I still have my squishy cover. The movie's okay. I mean, it's not bad.
Me and Elric want to see the movie that the cover to Psycho Cop returns from.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was such a beautiful embossed kind of cover too.
Like, ooh.
So I still have a ton to get through. I mean, the hearse, and there's the
Undertaker is the one I want to watch.
Yeah, let's try to do that one next, maybe, and we'll both try to do it at the same time.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a fun movie. Again, if you haven't watched it yet, the documentary is really great. There's like an hour-long doc about the making of it, and hearing Rifkin talk about horror movies.
It's definitely got that Wynorski Papa Top vibe for sure.
There
So if that's your vibe, you'll enjoy it more.
Nice.
There you go.
So I will start by saying that I'm really enjoying American Gods. Like across the board, it has become, I am just loving it. Well worth the cost of getting stars for a couple of months. So totally check that out. I will also say, I did not hate the Alien sequel. I know. You guys missed it.
We talked about it. We talked about it last week, but I think
no one hated it.
I think our conversation started out a little positive, and then started leaning more.
No, there was definitely. I will say that the things that I was most intrigued by about Prometheus, the things about Prometheus that made me say, "Hey, that was a really interesting take," they literally blew up in this one. So that kind of bothered me.
Okay.
But at the same time, I ate popcorn and enjoyed it and was amused the whole time. It definitely did not give us anything new. It didn't open up any new doors. But if I wanted an Alien movie that just kind of recycled the old ones, they did a really good job of that.
What's interesting, the people I know who hated Prometheus all tended to like this one more. Whereas I actually I really kind of liked Prometheus at the time. I knew there were stupid things about it, but it was so good looking. This movie isn't good looking to me. Like this, you know what I mean? And there's just something I felt pretty meh about this, but there's cool moments.
So I'll have to go back and listen to everybody's feedback on that one. But yeah, it was not my least favorite viewing of the year by any means, and I enjoyed it while I was watching it. But the one that I'm going to talk about now is not technically a horror film, but by far the scariest thing I have seen this year. The most disturbing, haunted me. Have you guys seen the Beaver trilogy?
I've seen the first two. I never saw the end, with Crispin Glover doing one and Sean Penn does one. I saw it like 20 years ago. It's really cool.
So really cool. It disturbed the shit out of me. So we're at the con and somebody brought me a copy of Ruben and Ed, and they were like, "You should watch this. You'll love it." And so Dave is like a huge fan of this movie, so we took it back to the hotel room, and he was like, "Oh my God, you have to see this." And we watched it, and I didn't get it. That movie is definitely not crazy for me. Dave thinks it's the most inspirational thing ever. But then we got really interested in the director because we were like, who created this chaos? So then we started looking up the actual director of Ruben and Ed and discovered the Beaver trilogy. So what this is he was working for a news affiliate somewhere, I think it was the Midwest, but anyway, he's working for a news affiliate and he's testing out a new camera and he starts interviewing this guy. And this is all like real footage. He starts interviewing this guy who's talking about how he hosts this pageant every year. And he is a, he's an impersonator. The girl who is in Grease. And I can't remember her
Olivia
name now.
Newton.
He's an Olivia Newton-John impersonator.
He is.
And he is. And so he interviews him. And so then Trent Harris actually goes with this guy to this pageant and films him as Olivia Newton-John and films the whole like small town pageant. Then he doesn't do anything with the footage for a couple of years. Then he hires actor Sean Penn to recreate all of the footage to pretend to be this guy who goes by Groovin' Gary, but he's an Olivia Newton-John impersonator, has Sean Penn redo all of the footage as Groovy Gary, and at the end, Sean Penn puts a gun in his mouth, starts to kill himself, and then he gets a phone call about doing another Olivia Newton-John impersonation gig.
Yes,
so then he has that footage. He doesn't do anything with it for a couple of years. And then he does the same thing, hires Crispin Glover to come play this character. Exact same thing. So it's 3 shot-for-shot remakes.
then I have seen it all because I thought for some reason there was no.
There's
seen the
a
whole
4th
thing.
one is a documentary
okay.
about making of all 3 of them.
That.
And that's on Netflix now, actually. I need to watch that one. I have not caught that one yet. But the actual movie, the Beaver Trilogy, is 3 shorts. The first one being the actual guy, Groovy Gary. Then the second one being Sean Penn doing the exact same thing, a shot-for-shot remake, except he tries to kill himself at the end. And then the third one being Crispin Glover. And Crispin Glover, because it's Crispin Glover, it's still the same thing and it's still a shot-for-shot, but he just is fucking off the rails to begin with, so you don't even know what the hell is going on half the time or what he's doing.
Wow.
It is the most bizarre, haunting experiment I have seen in years.
It was very cult. It was the
heard of this.
definition of cult because I know the early stuff was being passed around even before he had put it all together, but it was like very behind the thing. I've heard, and you'll probably know best, I heard this was already in development for Bloom as a remake.
Yes. Rumors.
It's rumors starting here. It's a very fascinating experiment. It's nothing that I would sit down with a group of people and be like, hey guys, let's have popcorn, drink beer. This
Party
is going to
movie.
be fun. It's haunting.
Right.
And I'm still like, we watched it while we were at the con, and I actually wish I hadn't watched it there because I was like, I need to talk to somebody about
probably
this.
Probably a bad day to do it right after a guy almost shot
It was just a weird film. It's pretty much, I mean, like, it felt David Lynchian, like an experimental, like, bizarreness is the only way I can describe it.
You just heard it for the first. A weird film with Crispin Glover. Who would ever think?
And it's called the Beaver Trilogy.
We watched it after Ruben and Ed. And I have to say, Crispin Glover on American Gods is just absolutely amazing. So it's been my
that's
Crispin
almost the thing
Glover-y
making
week.
me want to watch it more than anything. It's seeing what he does.
He's off the rails. It's like everything he's in where he's chewing the scenery, but he somehow is brilliant.
Yeah,
so.
no, he's always good even when he's big.
Yeah.
The Beaver Trilogy.
The Beaver Trilogy.
Well, guys, I only managed to squeak in 2 films over the last week, The Game and Psycho Cop, because last week, Friday the 13th, the video game, dropped on all of us. And I was a Kickstarter person that contributed some dough. And because their physical copies were delayed, they awarded those who did put in for the physical copies a digital code. So night before it was supposed to drop, they sent us a digital code. I started downloading. I literally dropped everything. I think I had a movie plugged in. I was getting ready to watch something. I was like, no, wait. But Friday the 13th, the video game, is pretty incredible. It is getting a bad rap because the game developers, who, mind you, are not on the level of Call of Duty or a lot of the major games like Star Wars Battlefront and so on, you know, these guys, they kickstarted the game. They are learning. Nobody should be learning as they go, but, you know, they're ironing out the kinks as they go. I think they underestimated the demand for the game, and they underestimated the desire to just jump on as soon as it came out, because obviously, you know, people just swarmed their servers and their servers started crashing.
Which has to help get another movie made. Like, if some people have to fucking pay attention,
right? You would think.
This is the thing we want.
But the goal of the game is simple. You either play... you have multiple counselors to choose from and multiple Jasons. There are some Jasons that are missing, Part 4, Jason X, and the remake. The goal of the counselors is to basically survive through various means. You can get in a car, or you can get in a boat, or you can call the cops, and the cops show up. And if you can get to one of those things and away from Jason, then you've won the round.
Wait, Jason X is there?
No, Jason X
No.
is not
Those are the
there.
ones that There is no Jason
No
X.
Jason Part 4 from Jason Part 4, nothing
Oh,
from Jason X, and
okay.
nothing from
No,
remake.
but it's like 2, 3.
It's 2,
Jason
3.
Lee,
Baghead
seven.
Jason? Baghead?
You
Oh,
can play
cool.
Baghead Jason.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Baghead Jason, which you could take off his bag
and look at that crazy
and look at
face.
the fucking
I
crazy
love that
face.
face. I want to play this.
It's pretty incredible. You could also call Tommy Jarvis or play Tommy Jarvis.
That's awesome.
And the goal of Jason is just to destroy every counselor you
Have you got
can.
Well, no, I'm not a video game guy
Yeah,
at
no.
all. I wish I was, but I watched it. I watched my friend Scott Reynolds played it, and I watched you go live for a little bit, and which is kind of hilarious because like nothing was happening. Then you like showed up and like 3 people got murdered immediately, and like I reacted exactly like you were like, "Oh shit, that was awesome!"
Yeah.
And it is. That's the thing. It's like the actually Brian Collins wrote a great piece on Birth Movies Death about it, and basically it's like. Everything it's more for because there's a level of fan service and then game, like it's for the Friday fans and then gamers, but it's more Friday fans than anything.
Right. There's a lot
And
there's a
all
lot
the
of nods and
subtle
faithfulness,
nods, and he was like he did screen grabs from the movies, like they got like the settings like
I
perfect.
saw the costume of my favorite one, the girl who always wears the sweaters. But I saw her costume.
Right now, there are 3 maps you can enjoy, and there's a lot of like you said, nods and faithfulness to the franchise. If you're Jason, you start in Jason's shack, and there's Mother's Head, and there's the shrine. There's a moment in which if you're a counselor and you discover Jason's shack, you can go in, wear Mother's sweater, and confuse Jason.
Wow, that's awesome.
If you're Jason from Part 6, you can throw the the knives that he's got in his little belt.
What's the goal? Like, how would somebody survive the game?
You either escape through car, and basically, if you're a counselor, your goal is to run around the entire map through the cabins and rifle through drawers, look in every nook and cranny because you want to find parts to the car. You either need to get a battery, gasoline, or keys. If you're going by boat, you need to get gasoline and a propeller.
So if you play as Jason or no?
But if you play as Jason, but so
You're
basically,
just
there's no single player campaign like any other video game. It's a multiplayer. It's a solely a multiplayer experience. So right now you can go in and do a quick game, and you play with anybody else. The algorithm will decide who gets to play Jason, who gets to play the counselor. There is a setting in which you can request how you spawn. You can either, say, hey, I'd prefer to just play Jason all the time or just a counselor. But my most of the success I've been having while the developers work out their kinks is just to play with friends. So you could do a private match, rope in all your buddies. So I played with Brian Collins, I played with Ryan Larson and a lot of the Shockwaves listeners. It was a real joy to get a request, and then someone pulled me in and they were like, "It's Ryan. We can hear your voice other than the podcast." And I was like, get ready to hear me scream a lot. And it was a total blast. I'll give you one example that just brought all of us down to our knees and crying. So there's a moment in which if you do get the car, it's a 2-seater. You can only fit 2 people in the car. So someone was like, if there's anybody near the car, please get there. I've got the keys. It's ready to go. So I start running to the car. I see someone in the distance at the car getting in. I'm like, wait for me, wait for me. I run to the car. I get in. We start to drive. Someone else runs up. It's like, no, me too. And we're like, sorry, buddy, we can't fit you. We start to drive. And then as we're driving, we see Tommy Jarvis by the side of the road shooting off camera. And I look behind me. Jason's chasing us. Oh. And the car keeps rolling. And I'm like, this is so amazing and harrowing. And we're driving. And all of a sudden the driver hits the tree. I'm like, what are you doing? Back the fuck up. What are you doing? They back up. And as they continue driving down the road, a counselor runs out into the middle of the road. We hit them head on. We hit them head on. We see their body fly over the car. Wow. We keep driving like another 10 feet, and we see his body land on the windshield and just slide off. And we were crying, literally crying. Meanwhile, we hear, I think it might have been Scott Foy who was actually that poor person. I think it was Scott. Sorry, Scott. And he was like crying. We're all just dying. And then we just drove off over the bridge and away from Crystal Lake to safety. But it's a lot of fun. The more you play, the more points you accrue, the more counselors you unlock, the more Jasons you unlock, the more abilities you unlock. You can unlock camp badges, like special badges for both counselors and Jason. There's one that you can get that has just a shark on it, and it's what happens when a counselor is trying to swim across the lake and you're Jason and you swim underneath them and pop up from behind and grab them and pull them underwater.
Now, does it go into like swim mode where it's like Super Mario where you can actually see underwater
You
and
can't
everything?
see underwater. What you see is the counselor that you're targeting, and you just see a red kind of glow from underneath the water, and you guide it to the counselor. But once you catch up to the counselor, it goes into cinema mode and the counselor stops and is like, huh? and then Jason pops up out of the water, grabs the person, and sinks him to the bottom.
Whoa.
It's amazing. It is so much fun.
Doesn't he have mild like teleportation? Like power?
Well, yeah, he gets. Well, you always wonder how he gets around so fast. So basically, you have the ability to kind of like root around the map and just bounce to different points in the map, or
the way
you,
Jason would.
yeah.
So how would we play it, Rob? If neither of us have the console,
You need an Xbox or
Okay.
PlayStation.
We're gonna have to. I think
Go
we
over
have to do that
somebody's
this
place.
summer because I think
Yeah.
because I am not a gamer, even though it's fun. I just haven't in years. But this is the kind of thing I would make absolutely a special
yeah. It
exception
sounds
for.
fun.
So what you need to do, I don't know if Scott Reynolds is on PS4 or Xbox, but everybody seems to be predominantly on PS4, at least the horror crowd that I've been playing with. A lot of the horror community and filmmakers and everybody that we talk to or, that's prominent online, they're all on PS4. So if you're on Xbox, sorry.
Yeah, and I heard next week the Just Before Dawn game's hitting, and it's going to be a sweet, beautiful Oregon landscape.
I feel bad because Tony Giles, our friend Tony in the UK, I keep like sending him invites and he just tweets at me. He's like, sorry, man, they haven't fixed there's like like some sort of gap between players overseas and players in the US. We can't play together yet. And it's like, please fix that. We want to play.
Yeah.
That's
kills
cool.
me.
It
So
sounds
That's
fun.
nice.
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. And again, F the haters who, instantaneously start complaining about the glitches. And, it's like, guys, give me a
Geek
fucking break,
rage.
man. Yeah, Geek Rage is just like out of control sometimes. It's like, look, Gun Media, who spearheaded this whole endeavor, they're still new to the game, and they're going to figure it
What's
out.
the cost
I know
to a normal
it's been
human?
2 or 3 days, and it's like everyone wants everything perfect at their fingertips immedially. And it's like
especially
we've got a Friday the 13th freaking
Exactly,
game. I got so
exactly.
excited just seeing 10 seconds of like Jason kill 3 people.
Do you
But I was
hear
like,
the
can't believe
kill,
this
kill, kill
exists.
stuff?
Oh,
Is it
that's
a
when
good
you know
soundtrack?
Jason's nearby and you're fucked. And like the funny thing is when Jason does like a special move where he's kind of like creeping up on you, there's like a VHS glitch in the picture.
Nice.
So you'd be running and all of a sudden it goes and there's like tracking problems.
Like Glenn McQuaid's movie from VHS.
Yes,
That one, the
yes,
slasher
very
one.
much. Yeah.
That's
So
cool.
there's a lot of this is a very special game, a lot of fun. It's just a complete love letter to the game. And I had to as soon as I was done playing over the weekend, I was like, I'm just going to toss in part 7. I was going to watch part 7 right now. But a lot of fun. The game is only $50, I think. And then you could buy the DLC. I have Tom Savini designed a new Jason for it.
Yeah.
It's the Hellfire Jason.
So if
Kane,
you own,
Kane did all the
Oh, he did the
stuff.
body stuff?
He
Kane
did
did all
the
the-
body stuff, so it's all Jason
Oh,
kills.
wow.
So you're talking about you buy the game, but when you say they're still working on it, does that mean they're just you could keep re-uploading?
It'll keep, you'll get
keep
downloads.
improving
You'll get
it.
down.
That's
upload,
cool.
yeah.
That's cool. I think that should be totally acceptable.
Yeah.
Better than buying a disc that is now fucked once it's no good.
Right,
you know?
right.
It was funny because I was sitting there with my kid and I was like, hey, all right, Jackie, we need to find my name amongst the credits because, if you're a Kickstarter person, you get all the credits. So the credits for all the Kickstarter backers start piling up. I mean, it was thousands of names. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so screwed. I'll never be able to see it. And then it popped up towards the tail end and I was like, there it is.
That's fun.
Yeah,
Well,
but I saw a lot of familiar names in there.
How much did they raise for the Kickstarter? It must have been a big one. Then.
Yeah,
it
because
was
they would have had to
huge.
pay
Yeah.
licensing
Million
rights to
million
this.
or less?
I can do a quick search.
Because for a game development, that seems like big money.
Yeah, because you would have to not only develop the game and release
property.
it, but the property
Yeah.
itself, I assume they wouldn't let that go for
And there was-
cheap.
yeah.
Plus, you're referencing all the films,
Right.
not just
or that maybe
one.
not. Maybe that's why they can't reference all of them. Is that why?
No, because I think Brian mentioned something about that, but then there's hints about those films in the game.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm
Wow.
gonna share his article because
That
he wrote a
actually
pretty
seems-
good,
Yeah.
extensive.
I kind of want to
write-up
play
about
it one time first before
Me
I read
too.
it.
Just come over.
Just to do
Just
it.
come over and play. So
that
they raised,
actually seems
yeah.
really low for a game.
Well, they raised close to $1 million, $823,000.
Yeah.
But I think they had to stop at some point, and I think
That's
there's a
what
point
demand.
where you do have to
Yeah,
stop.
Baghead. Love that. Two is one of those movies that going back to. I mean, one day we just have to go back and talk about all the Friday 13th. But I watched 2 again recently, and it's really a great movie. It's a really, really
2?
effective slasher film. Like,
2's great.
not so much just Jason film, but just a good slasher movie. Very cool.
Yeah.
I have 2 quick things to plug before we break and go into our interview.
I got
First
stuff
thing.
to talk about today.
Oh, cool. Sorry. Then go ahead, Rob.
I'm going to be really quick about these because I don't have much to say. But I checked out a movie from 1966 called Circus of Fear.
Oh my God, I love Circus of Fear.
Yeah, it's a weird one.
Yeah, the poster is really iconic.
Is
I
that not
love
Hammer
it.
as well?
No,
Or is that
well,
Amicus
no,
or
but
something?
it's
I thought it was one.
it's also been called Psycho Circus. It stars Christopher Lee and Klaus
Yeah.
Kinski.
Psycho
Yeah,
Circus.
yeah.
There we go.
That's another title, and it was put out by Blue Underground on Blu-ray as a double bill with something called Five Golden Dragons,
which is
I've
also
yet
a
to
good
see.
movie
But,
because it's a nice little Peter Cushing kind of kung fu movie.
And I think it might be the same director. I think that's why they're both paired up the way they are. But I mean, look, it's I didn't 100% love it, but because it begins with like some weird heist that Klaus Kinski is behind, of course, and then they end up in a circus where I guess Christopher Lee is wearing a hood.
Is he the knife thrower?
And mask? Yes, the knife
I
thrower.
remember.
And
I
he's
have seen this,
masquerading as Anyway, I just wanted to mention that one because I mean, Blue Underground. They're obviously Bill Lustig's company, and they're mostly well known for putting out, some of the exploitation stuff from the '80s. But this is like, he's been doing a lot of weird movies like this lately with the Blue Underground label. So I really like that. And the only other thing I wanted to mention was I was at the New Beverly last weekend, and they did a Tim Burton double bill of Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Ed Wood.
Yeah, Ed Wood's one of the greatest movies ever made.
And that's, I mean, it's his two best movies back to back, and almost 10 years apart. And the main reason I wanted to mention, well, first of all, Pee-wee's Big Adventure is a movie that you can mention any line from that movie and I'll know exactly that it's Pee-wee's Big Adventure, but I've never seen it with a crowd. That movie freaking slayed. Like, I mean, laugh out loud every 2 minutes and a whole theater full of people. Like, everyone just got it and really loved it. And the thing that strikes me about that movie, which needs to be reminded of Tim Burton, is that he directed the shit out of that movie. Next time you see it, like, every shot, every frame, the music choices, like even Danny Elfman, because it was pretty early in his career, like those guys are on fire for every decision
There's so many
of that movie.
There's like various different themes like that Elfman just rolls one into the next, into the next. Like the music just propels you, keeps you going. It's just part of the fun of seeing a director's first movie again is the energy behind it. But Ed Wood is one of my, I think that's my favorite Tim Burton movie.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
And obviously it's a biopic about the horror connection is it's a biopic about Edward D. Wood Jr. And his friendship with Bela Lugosi at the very end of his life. And I forgot how sad and poignant the movie is too. I also totally forgot that Vincent D'Onofrio plays Orson Welles.
One of the best cameos
I saw his
ever.
name in the credits, and I'm like, where is he in this movie? And then he popped up as Orson Welles. I was like, oh.
I forgot what the line is, but he's like telling the story about he's like, my next picture, Kane. It's like, oh, okay.
The only one I had control over. And Kane, he lights up and stuff.
That's right.
But it's pretty great. And what's funny is like, I actually don't know Ed Wood movies that well, but I went back after, of course, and started watching a few little snippets online. They don't look nearly as bad as they make it out to be. Like, he didn't seem like the worst director
Some of
of
them
all
are
time.
pretty hard to get
I'm
to.
sure, but
to watch the whole movie.
I
like,
mentioned Orgy of the Dead a couple of weeks ago, guys.
Well, Leonard Glenda is really hard to get there because it's a weird mishmash of almost documentary, but then it's Ed Wood walking around with the sweater, and you're like, what am I watching?
At the time, I mean, it was definitely the worst filmmaking to come along, but we've had decades since then.
Yes, that's true. Well, also, we didn't have digital filmmaking. The digital filmmaking had it, but there are Plan 9 and stuff has beautiful set pieces and fun. So,
Sure.
But his passion, that's all I want. I
think that's what stood out the most is the this guy surrounded himself with a lot of weird. Everybody listening to this can relate to it.
Oh yeah.
I think he says something like, "If I judge people by their weirdness, I would have no friends."
Yeah.
Or something like that.
I think that's the only Halloween costume I've done twice. Oh no, Dress to Kill I've done twice, but I've done Ed Wood twice, like wearing an Angora sweater, and I make myself look black and white, wearing a suit with a little mustache, and then I have a little clipboard. I've got a good picture with me and Gulliger at a party when I first got here.
See that.
And it's pretty funny, but it's because it's an easy one. But I love that movie. I think also the guys who wrote it, Karaszewski, he was probably there.
He was
Scott
up the
Alexander.
first night. Yeah.
They're just geniuses at the biopic. They are able to do something with it that makes it so entertaining. That and Larry Flint, they're both great movies.
I mean, those Bella lines, let's shoot this fucker. It's classic.
There's actually a great interview with him on Martin Landau on Mark Maron, WTF.
Oh,
The part about this movie
that.
is particularly, especially the part where he talks about that he had the idea to shoot it in black and white because it was going to be in color. And he had the idea, and by the time he called Burton had also just had that idea because he realized this will not work in color. Like, it's going to fail.
Right.
I mean, it's going to be a terrible performance.
Well, and also that's how, because Rick Baker turned Martin Landau into Bela Lugosi, and they accounted for black and white in terms of how to do the makeup, because you can get away with more shadows and stuff if it's not going to be lit for color.
Yeah, it's
great. If you've never seen it, you have to see it. It's fantastic.
It's a great one.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah. Well, quick correction: the Five Golden Dragons did not have Peter Cushing in it. It is
another Christopher Lee.
It's Christopher Lee plays one of the dragons, but the lead is Robert Cummings. So it's been a while since I've seen it. But yeah, Five Golden Dragons. Anyway, 2 plugs really quick. If you were in the Los Angeles area, this weekend is the Etheria Film Festival at the Egyptian. I'll be doing the Q&A again. It is a gathering of the best women-directed shorts in horror, fantasy, and sci-fi. So definitely come check that out. It's always a good time. And then also this next week, we are seeing the opening of the Fringe Festival here in Los Angeles. There are 2 horror musicals. I will quickly plug that Robot Monster. There's a musical for it, Robot Monster, which is the gorilla in the underwater diver's helmet. Yep. I'm kind of intrigued to see what they do with that, but the one that I'm giving the most love to is Slashed, which is directed by Chelsea Stardust, written by our friend Sean Keller, and I did the choreography for it, and it's produced by Clark Wolf, who's been on the show before. Yep. So it is a love letter to 80s slasher films, so if you're in the Los Angeles area, definitely check out Slash.
I'll be seeing that on Sunday.
Yay!
Cool. I'm going to see it the week after.
I've heard there's fun dancing in it.
How long is it on? I don't want to miss it, but I don't.
I think it's most of June.
It runs for most of June. It's kind of spotty, where it's like every other, couple of days.
1 or 2 a week, I think they're doing.
I mean, it's an homage to slasher, so we got to make it to
And
that
speaking of, to set up what you're about to hear, what happened was we were at Texas Frightmare, and I'd been trying to coordinate with Sean Cunningham for several months, literally months.
It's been a while.
Show. It was very difficult. And the problem is he is not available on the night that we normally record this. And that's the thing. Getting the 4 of us in a room together is difficult, which is why we have our set date to do. But anyway, it was Sean, and actually our good friend Blake Regal was able to help set it up. It was on an off night, but literally it was when we just got back from Texas and things were kind of up in the air. So at the last minute, only Beck and I can make it.
But it's okay. It's an awesome interview.
It's okay. It's a great interview. It's a fun chat. And just to preface, he loves Diet Coke. So I made sure to have 2 Diet Cokes available for him. But he tended to burp and then smirk a lot during the interview.
Yes, he would burp and then giggle.
Burp and smirk a production company.
Well, he was like chugging, like in the 45-minute interview, he made it through like 3 Diet Cokes.
So I'm only bringing that up so that it's not awkward while you're listening if you hear anything.
Him burping and smirking.
That should be the Sean Cunningham
I'm giving him his
doll.
defense now, the Diet Coke, okay?
Yeah, he was drinking a lot of Diet Coke.
He was drinking a lot of Diet Coke, and he just like, because he didn't give a damn. He was just like, it'd be in the middle of a thought, burp, and then just look at us and be like, so I thought I was like, I might have to preface that before you listen. But anyway, that's what's coming up next. But who's sponsoring us this week?
Today's sponsor is Shudder, the premium streaming video service devoted to horror thrillers and suspense. Backed by MC Network, Shudder has a growing and dynamic selection of thrilling premieres, originals, and exclusives, including Rob Zombie's 31, The Ring vs. The Grudge franchise mashup, Upset a Cow vs. Kayako, and Prevenge.
Yes, and new this week is the Shudder exclusive Nurawa the Curse, a J-horror gem from the director of Sadako vs. Kayaku. Paranormal expert and documentarian Masufao Kabayashi seeks the truth behind a string of paranormal incidents connected by the legend of an ancient demon called the Kukagutaba in this lost found footage masterpiece from 2005, unreleased in the U.S. until now, and hopefully with subtitles.
Shudder is available on the web, iOS, Android, Chromecast, Apple TV, and Roku for $4.99 a month or $49.99 with an annual membership. But Shockwave listeners can get a free month by entering promo code SHOCK at checkout.
So go to Shudder.com today and find the best collection of horror available to stream anywhere.
Go Shudder!
Okay, so welcome back. We are officially down 2 hosts, but we are up 1 terrific guest.
Yeah, they're dropping like flies, but I think we got a really cool guest instead.
This will make up for it instead. Somebody we've been wanting to have on the show for a really long time.
We've talked about it for years. Like back when we were doing Killer POV, we kept saying we would make like our ideal guest list, and this name was always on there.
Pretty much every time I rewatch the House movies every couple of years, and I'm like, I need to talk about this franchise with one particular gentleman. And thanks to our friend Blake Regal for making this happen. We're happy to have with us Sean Cunningham.
Thank you. Thank you.
Man.
Welcome
to the show, man. And first and foremost, I do want to congratulate you on this sudden House revival, because we've been talking about it for the last couple of weeks, because we keep getting our box sets from Arrow, and I think they did a terrific job with it.
So we've revisited all the movies just within the past few weeks, and it kept coming up at Texas Frightmare as well, because we were right across from the Arrow booth.
Yes.
And so we were getting people right as they had just bought them, and then we'd be like, oh, you got the House box set. So I feel like I've been talking about House for like a month now, and here you are.
And I believe they sold out of the House box
they
set,
did.
So.
That's
I'm
awesome.
so glad for them.
Yeah.
Very, very nice people, and they did everything they could to make it as good as they could do. So it's kind of a win-win.
Right. And it's got to be weird to have yet another franchise that keeps coming back to you.
Oh, Lord. Yeah.
But it's terrific.
Do we want to jump back to the beginning?
Yeah, you know what? Because I don't know the beginning. So usually what we like to do, especially with filmmakers that we admire, there's always a point where as a young man, you get this interest in filmmaking. You see a movie or something that changes your perspective of what movies is. I'm trying to romanticize it, but
the horror that sparked it.
No.
Did that happen for you? What were kind of the earliest recollections?
No, I have pretty conscious recollections. I went to school at Stanford. I was studying for a master's in drama.
Where were you from originally? Like what
Connecticut.
area? Connecticut. Okay.
Born in New York and grew up in Connecticut. And, I went to school in Pennsylvania and went to graduate school at Stanford. And then I went from there to Ashland, Oregon, did some Shakespeare. I was a spear carrier. And
wow.
But it was, I really was taken with it. And from there I went to New York, and I was fortunate enough to get a job. I got a job as a dresser on the national company of Merry Widow. And that was because one of my best friends' father was starring in it, and he just got me the job. And I remember him saying something like, well, it only pays $600 a week. And I said, $600? I didn't know what in the world I'd do with $600 a week.
Right.
God, that was great. And in fact, when I started doing the show, I had virtually nothing to do. He had one jacket he had to change in 2 hours, but fortunately, I made friends with the stage manager, and he started, for whatever reasons, to train me how to do what he did, and that's when I just started to learn the craft. And after 6 months, I guess 6-7 months, we went back to New York, and he was production stage manager at City Center, and he brought me on as his second. And we did a bunch of shows, and it went on and on. But I was really interested in theater. And I said, gee, I can make a living as a stage manager. And in fact, I was kind of a child prodigy stage manager. And after a couple of years, I looked around and I realized that this is about all there is. And, what people would hope for is to get a show like Cats or something that would run for 10 years. And the thought of doing the same thing night after night for 10 weeks was more than I could take. But for 10 years, I just couldn't imagine it. So I said, well, maybe I can do something else. And I said, well, I think I'll look into producing, see what that means. And I did my due diligence, and I just discovered that I thought it was just a terrible place to invest. How do these people make money? And so I can't remember. Oh, yes, I do. But then a couple of friends of mine, and I decided to put on a road company tour of artists, including Mickey Rooney. And as it turns out, on opening night, Mickey Rooney hit a tree. The show was canceled, but we had insurance, and so everybody got paid off. And at the end of that, we had like $3,000. And so the first idea that I had was, instead of putting it into an off-Broadway show, why don't we put it into a movie? Because you got to do the same thing. I mean, you hire actors, you get a script, you decide, someplace to rehearse it and put it on. But then if you make a movie, you can show it around the world, and you don't have to pay all this weekly overhead and so on and so forth.
Now, had you shot a film at this point?
I didn't even know what a camera looked like. I mean, it was just...
So you didn't know what all went into it, just hey, let's put some money towards this.
Well, yeah, because a friend knew a friend who had a camera.
That's good. Hey, that's still how stuff gets done. Wait, you own a Red? I can do, yeah exactly. It's still how things get done now.
No, but anyway, that was and it was just problem solving initially, because this was a sort of a fake marriage manual kind of movie. And so we shot the movie. I didn't know what to do with it. And then you learn about, well, what do you have to pay this money for? In that case, it was edge numbering, and then there's something called negative cutting, and just I didn't know what this never ends with these costs, and so we finished it, and it took forever. It must have been at least 2.5 or 3 weeks. And anyway, and then I said, okay, what do you do with this thing? And I took out the yellow pages and looked under movie theaters. And who had movie theaters? I started calling them up. I said, I got this movie. Would you like to see it? Play it?
No, you were still in New York at this time?
I was in New York, yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, I tell this story just because it just demonstrates that I knew absolutely nothing.
Right.
But each day was, just learn something else. And so a guy on 42nd Street named Bingo Brandt.
That's a great name.
Bingo Brandt. Takes me up into his office, which is right on the corner of 42nd Street and Broadway, and he goes, look out there, kid. See that? You see? What do you see? And I'm looking. It's 42nd Street. You see everything. He says, tell me what you see. I said, I don't know what, Mr. Brandt. He goes, people. That's what I got. I got people. And what he meant was he had this theater right on the corner, and people walked back and forth every day. So he said that yes, he would play this movie, and then we made a deal, and it was the same deal he makes for everybody. It was my introduction to distribution, and but the stupid movie ran for 27 weeks.
Wow!
Or something.
Wow!
So incredible, and as it turns out, now I was a movie producer, but I had something that other movie producers didn't have. I had a hit.
Right.
Now, albeit it was small, but however much money we put up, we now had more at the end, and that was sort of an unheard of phenomenon.
Wow. What was this film? Does it still exist?
I doubt it very much, but it was, we were really, really concerned that we might get arrested.
Okay,
and
I like the sound of this already.
Yeah.
And it was really soft, very softcore porn, but it was framed by having a doctor in a white coat.
Oh, so
it became a white
educational
coater.
A standard kind of exploitation hygiene film was what they were usually
called.
called.
That was the next generation. But this we just didn't know if they were going to let us play it, because at that point the only thing that you can play in movie theaters was sort of nudist volleyball movies and stuff.
Wow. Strategically placed bushes and umbrellas.
Those are the ones,
all the Doris Wishman ones.
Anyway. That's pretty much how it got started. And then, having had this hit movie, then I said, well, if we really tried to do this movie right and better, maybe it could actually play in theaters outside of 42nd Street.
Right.
Which led to the most expensive family movie ever made, called Together. And together was, again, we're just like learning by braille, just touching around.
Was this actually a family movie, or was it a exploitation family movie?
It was very much another hygiene film.
Okay.
Starring Marilyn Chambers.
Definitely a hygiene film.
Yes.
Okay.
She was one of the cleanest people I've ever known. Yeah, she was great. And anyway, and we made together, which was, the voice of authority was my dad. And then most of the cast in this sort of make-believe getaway retreat, the comma retreat, were my brothers and friends and, just people.
So you really did get your whole family involved in this, even though it was kind of an exploitation film.
Well, what it did, its form was that you'd see all of these healthy, tan people, and they would just say outrageous things, and then from time to time, then you go back to the doctor, and he'd indicate that in the interest of better marriages and better relationships, you should have better sex, for instance. And then we dissolved from that to a couple on a sort of a sari draped set.
Wow.
And sitar music playing in the background.
Wow.
And then we come back, through, and it was terrible.
Hot.
But
they made money.
Yeah.
It did make some money.
Right.
And as it turns out, that was on that movie that I met Wes Craven. Mm-hmm. And then the people to whom we were able to sell the movie said, geez, I really like it. Is there anything else you want to do? And Wes and I said, yeah, I don't know, but we'll try to do something. And out of that came Last House on the Left.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
can you talk a little bit about meeting Wes? Did you have an immediate kinship with him in terms of creativity?
No, we had an immediate bond of humor. Wes was a very funny guy, and he had been a college professor, and he'd come to New York, and he had this dream of films, and he was working for a documentary filmmaker. And then I had been just shooting together, and I needed some help, and Wes became the editorial assistant. He sunk up dailies and so on, and we just got along great. And Wes was the assistant editor, and in many ways he wound up cutting the film together at the very end, and it was a very, very long task. But that's how we became friends, and I got to know his kids. He got to meet mine, and it was we stayed friends until he died. I mean, it was a very strong bond.
Now, how did the horror element come into play? Was that a grain of your relationship from the get-go, or was it after you were kind of like, well, what do we do next? Why not horror?
It was kind of a what do you do next, but Wes was very, in his own way, very sensitive. And I remember that we went to see a few movies together, and there was, I think, a Man with No Name, one of that early series. And for whatever reasons, I started counting the number of people that fell down. Bang, you're dead. Bang, you're dead. Bang, bang, bang. And it was something like 150 people or something. And Wes and I had talked about it. And what happened is that this thing that they were calling, it were movie deaths, I guess. And they were so artificial, but in some way, in some disturbing way, Wes felt it was like bad for our culture and so on. And it had become very impersonal. Mm-hmm. And so he said, but if you ever tried to, if we could tell a story that was much more personal, it would screw people's minds up, and it would, and in his own way, it would be so violent it would become anti-violent. It's kind of a tenuous argument, but Wes was very, very, very gentle guy, and out of this came this notion of Last House on the Left, which was he drew from The Virgin Spring, the same kind of structure,
which is an amazing film, Virgin Spring.
Yeah, and so anyway, that's and then from there it's like, what do we do next?
Well, is this true? Because one of our writers, Joe Madry, very talented friend and writer of ours,
Joe.
had done this great article on our website about the quote-unquote lost years of Wes Craven and Sean Cunningham. And basically in it, I guess he'd interviewed both of you guys throughout the years. And I guess this is before Last House, there was a project called Mustang. You guys were trying to do
No, that was after Last House.
Okay, so these were projects that you guys were trying to get off the heat of Last House.
Right.
So what opportunities was Last House?
Please, there was no heat connected.
Well, actually, I mean, Last House, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this, because Last House definitely made enough of a wave that all of these, like, it kind of, everybody started parodying it, you know, Last House Next to the Graveyard and Third Door Down the Road. And at the same time, it really did, when you're looking at those kind of post-war violent films that came out in the 70s, that's the one that a lot of people point to as the spark. That was the one that, you know, kind of said, okay, well, here's where we're going. And it was the catalyst. So
yeah, I say it was that. And I don't think it was intentional on our part. We were, you know, I thought of us as, in 2020 hindsight, you know, it's like we were kids going out drawing pictures on fences in the middle of the night and hoping not to get caught. And can we get away with this stuff?
Right.
But our orientation was very much 60s, 70s sort of, it was not meant to be violent for its own sake. In fact, you know, Wes was very concerned that sometimes violence, you know, destroys the people that are the victims and they become the perpetrators. And that was a theme that he had interwoven in it. But, you know, it was a very, very difficult film to watch. And when we finished it, I didn't want to revisit it particularly, neither did Wes. And people, it did light a spark, but it was some extraordinary reviews where people say, this is the worst film ever made.
Wow.
These people,
and it's now considered to be like such a canon of the genre.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. It's like we grew up with it, knowing it that way. But I'm curious to hear about the reaction when it came out. Cause...
You know, it was meant to be a drive-in movie. And when it first opened, it had a couple of different titles, and one was called Krug and Company. Anyway, they were not very good titles. And I remember this advertising guy called me, and he said, you know, we want to try the film out next week. I want to call it Last House on the Left. What do you think? And I said, I don't know. I mean, what we've got didn't work. And it's not about a house particularly. Last House on the Left doesn't really play. But sure, try it out, why not? Yeah. And that was also the time when they had the little graphic that said on the poster, just keep telling yourself, it's only a movie. Yeah. It's only a movie. It's only a movie. And that's, I think, what really sold it. But it became Last House on the Left, and it did a lot of business in limited situations.
Mm-hmm. Oh. And what I mean, you were saying that it didn't give you heat, but what opportunities, if any, did it present after it came out? I mean, did it, because I assume it was financially successful. So
it was, but it wasn't. We were not in the mainstream at that point. That was the point that AIP and Roger Corman were just sort of starting off. We weren't particularly competing with them, but it was a time of low-budget movies and low-budget returns. It was okay. You made a film for $100,000 and you spent a lot of time distributing it, and maybe you'd get back $200,000. And it was sort of that kind of a business. You know, now it's become this big crapshoot that on your weekend, you're going to do a certain amount of money and so on. But none of that existed. So it was very, very small. Think of it as mom and pop kind of business. And so we didn't, there were things we wanted to do. I wanted to do Mustang, which I really thought was an interesting project. I was also interested in doing, I wanted to do a kids film, and I chose Hansel and Gretel. And I did a bunch of work on Hansel and Gretel. And then when I had the script and storyboards, and I'd take it out and start pitching it to people, and they'd go, oh, God. That's horrible. You can't have, kids shouldn't see that. And, it was an introduction to the strength of a certain kind of stories and the archetypal environment And you know, and I think that when I was studying Hansel and Gretel, I ran into Bruno Bettelheim, who's a psychologist, and but he had a really interesting take on why it was that certain stories had a resonance that lasted a very long time, and they were usually stories told around a campfire. Now, Hansel and Gretel, for instance, you know, it's a story about a family that's hungry, and the mother and father take the two kids and leave them out in the woods to die so that they would have enough money, enough food to live. And the two kids are lost in the woods. But luckily they left a trail of breadcrumbs so they could get out. But the birds ate all the breadcrumbs, and darkness falls, and it just gets worse and worse and worse for those kids. And you know, then finally they get to a place where it looks like it's all going to be okay, and it's bright and shiny, and there's lots of candy, and next thing you know, this witch pushes the brother Hansel into the cage. He's going to fatten him up real good to eat him, and you know, somehow or other they have to escape or die, and they're going to be eaten or die. And they, in fact, find a way to push the witch into the oven and to escape with their lives, fade to black. I mean, that was the happy ending.
It's such a bizarre fairy tale, because most of the fairy tales that come out of that time period, they've got some lesson behind it. You know, don't talk back, don't look in the room, don't do as you're not supposed to. And that one, it really has no lesson or moral even. Like, don't have poor parents and eat the witch's house. It's
don't
just
abandon your children in the woods. I don't know.
No, because the parents never get their comeuppance.
No,
they
that's
walk
true.
away.
No, but there's a different dynamic, and here's what I learned. I asked exactly the same questions, but the function of the story is to take something that you're really afraid of, and you may not be able to give words to it. Hansel and Gretel, my parents could leave me; they could die. You know, what'll I do if I'm left all alone? You don't have words for this, but this is like the kind of a fear that might exist. And then, if you were left out all alone in the woods, and then you did get to some place where it looked like it might be okay, but then it's not, and it gets worse still, you can survive. It's okay. You can survive. It's okay. And so, the more you watch that story, the more you hear it, the more comfortable you come with the fear that's behind it. And so that you'll find that the stories that have a lot of resonance, particularly grim fairy tales, they often deal with these dark subjects because they represent fears that we have, but we don't have words for it. And it's in there that the interest comes. And it's in there that, for instance, the kids will ask you to read a bedtime story. Maybe it could be anything. It could be Bambi or The Lion King or, you know, something. But you better not change a word, because they hear it and hear it and hear it. They want it the way that it's supposed to be. And in well written, these things just work. And it's sort of part of the rite of passage to adulthood. I know that when I did Friday the 13th, I was like, what could this movie be about? And if it's going to be just this dark movie, what's underneath it? And for me, I was thinking, being in high school, I think that when we were in high school, just about everybody remembers a time when they came to school in the morning and somebody that they knew had just driven a motorcycle into a tree or had a terrible thing happen to him. And the school collectively goes into shock. He was just here. He was a flesh and blood person, and he's dead. And we never knew quite how to handle it. And it's because I think that as kids, we think we're invulnerable. Yeah. That we're wearing this shield. Bad things happen to those other people, maybe to grown-ups, but not to us. And that is sort of underneath that. And that what happened in Friday the 13th is that the kids die not for any particular rhyme or reason. It's sort of like the swimmers in Jaws. That's really where it became totally clear to me that in Jaws, there are a couple, three great shots looking up at swimmers, and all you see is feet kicking back and forth, and there's young people and old people and kids and grandmothers and who knows, and you have no protection whatsoever from the shark. And so the shark doesn't say, oh, is that a good person or a bad person? That person go to church? Is that person kind to his mother? No. Only thing is, if he's hungry, he's just going to chomp down on it. And knowing that the world can be that arbitrary and that we really don't have shields and that we're vulnerable all the time is a very, very strong fear. And so that rather than, taking Friday the 13th and being some sort of a cautionary tale and virginity is its own reward, and you can live to the end of the movie if you are chaste. I mean, that wasn't even remotely part of the gestalt. It became, other people, went down that road and tried to make different kinds of movies. But I was trying to just embrace that notion of that unnamed fear that was kind of universal. Mm-hmm. And the movie itself went in its own directions, but that's how I started.
Wow. Well, before we get to that, I know she wants to ask you about a film that I haven't seen this one.
Uh-oh.
But
People Who Own the Dark.
People Who Own the Dark is one of my favorite films of all time. And you're listed as a producer
of all time.
on it. It is. I love this movie.
What was it called?
People Who Own the Dark. No, and this I've written about it on the website, on the Blumhouse website so many times, and I wrote about it at Fangoria because it's a lesser known film. Definitely kind of obscure, but it's one that I have absolutely loved. And they're getting ready to do like a fancy release of it, aren't they?
Now, I really don't know how to break your heart like this, but I had nothing to do with that movie. I never even saw them. I don't know who listed it.
Oh my
or
gosh.
Why.
Okay, fine.
You mean to tell me the IMDb is wrong?
The IMDb is wrong. You are listed as a producer on that movie.
That's so funny.
It's okay. You're still awesome.
I'm still okay.
We're still happy to have you here.
We were surprised
Fuck
to see
you,
your name listed today.
IMDb. Yeah. Okay. I was so excited because I've never been able to talk about that movie with anybody, but it's okay.
And that trend will continue. Apparently.
Let's go. We're going to Friday. Moving to Friday.
But you know what? Here's the thing. I have two specific things I think I want to ask you about Friday the 13th, because I know you talked about it, pun intended, to death.
In excess.
And I don't want to ask you the same old thing. But anyone listening to this show knows who you are, and I always respected and loved basically the way that you got Friday going, which is, based on the success of Halloween, you found this date, this title, and put an ad out in Variety before it existed, and basically laid your stake in it, saying, we're making Friday the 13th. Nobody said anything. All right, I guess we're making Friday the 13th.
No, that's pretty accurate.
So my question is, would that even be possible in today's day and age, or was that a matter of just timing, a little bit of timing, and maybe just naivety in terms of be like, oh well, let's lay our claim on it and then we'll do it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I it was such a different world.
Yeah.
That you could make a bet like that and maybe it works out. But today I don't know what would happen if you made Friday the 13th today, just all on your own, and said, "Whoa, come on." And a distributor wouldn't be able to distribute it because there wouldn't be stars in it. There wouldn't be, a brand. There wouldn't be anything else. So it doesn't make any difference what the film costs. It's going to cost them $20, $30, sometimes $35 million to release it. Mm-hmm. So if it cost $1 million or $3 million or 50 cents, they're looking at it as that plus this big amount of money. So how do you get that much money back and make a profit? And we don't support movies now the way we used to. Mm-hmm. We support them through Netflix and Amazon and cable channels. And it's a great time to be telling stories and making movies, but it wouldn't happen in the movie theater. That door is pretty much closed today. But what I did was, I'll tell you this. I think one of the big myths about, or big lies about movies and directing movies and producing movies is you go to school and you learn a lot and you become competent and you say, okay, coach, I'm ready. Send me in. And you've got your student film, or maybe you've got two, and you go out and you start to show it to the world. And you are hoping that somebody is going to give you a job. And here is the truth. There are no jobs, none, for first-time directors, often for second or third-time directors. There aren't any, period. The only person who is going to hire you is you. And so what you should understand that that's what you're walking into. Now, it's kind of terrific that you can make movies for so little money comparatively today. And you can demonstrate how good or bad you are. But you have to make your own movies. And that way, and you make your own movies, and you should also take responsibility if you're trying to figure out how to get your money back. Not just to do it as an artistic exercise. Because if you want to be in the movie business, you have to be in the movie business. You know,
right.
This is not museum art. But I think it's very important to know that there aren't those jobs out there, especially before you start signing on for $200,000 worth of student loans and whatever else it costs. It's just not, the jobs are not there. And the pressure to work, and you get paid less and less to do more and more. You just have to, you have to love it. But you also have to understand it's going to be a very long road from the time that you start out to the time you actually might get a job.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we always say you really have to focus on making your own opportunities. And I know Becca makes her own films all the time because you have to keep doing them.
No, actually, when we were at, we just finished a convention, and one of the things that I actually said on my panel when somebody was like, well, how do you get a job on a film in LA? And I'm like, it's not on Craigslist. Yeah. It's not like you're scrolling through Craigslist and it's like director listings or anything like that. It seriously is who you know and who you're at. And it's always just kismet of, being in the right place at the right time with the right project. And this person happens to be in a particular mood this day and says, okay. And there's no one comes knocking on your door and says, we're looking for a director really quick. It's always about making sure that you've been doing it and then doing it so often that somebody says, hey, this guy's been doing it a lot. He's already here. Let's just get him.
Yeah. And then the door opens a crack.
Yeah.
And it's doing what you're doing is exactly the road that other people are going to face, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
And it's terrific that that you're going out and grabbing it and doing it.
Thanks. I made a number of shorts before I was finally just like, and everybody kept saying, so when you get your first film done, come back to me. I'd love to read some of your stuff. And so it reached a point where I was like, okay, well, no, I'll just do it myself. You know what? I'll do it. So
you have to.
I did.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, those speeches which are, alarm bells should go off in your head. Oh, I really like your script. It's not for us now, but geez, if you have anything else, I would love to see some of your work. What they're really saying is, go out, spend a year of your life, write another script, and let me see it for nothing.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
so how did, knowing those lessons coming out of like all of your production stuff, how did this transition you into starting on Friday the 13th? Like, were you looking at the markets at the time saying, what's profitable? Horror. Let's kill kids.
Yeah. No. And well, here's what it was. By the time that I decided that I was going to go into the movies, it was a way of trying to figure out a way to make a living. I had a wife, and I had very quickly had two kids, a dog, a mortgage, not a mortgage, but I had, rent and stuff. And there were a whole bunch of people looking at me to bring home enough money to support them. So anything that I looked at it with the filter of I'm going to try to make something for $10. Can I sell it for $15? Who's going to buy it? I meant that was just at the very, very beginning, and it doesn't stop. You have to say, I'm going to make this thing. It's probably going to cost a certain amount of money. Why would if I'm taking somebody else's money to do it, they have a reasonable expectation of doing better than they would in a bank. And if you lose sight of that, you lose sight of really of all of your control and the opportunity to do more things. Not that, it doesn't always work out, but that's got to be one of your goals. And so back to your question, I had I had been trying to make different movies, so whether it was Mustang or Hansel and Gretel or a documentary or whatever it was, I tried to figure out and bought some equipment, then I could rent the equipment and what happened for me was I had gone to Spain to try to make a dreadful movie that was going to had tax shelters attached to it in the United States, which I had kind of had a hand in putting it together. I thought it would be a great adventure, and I went to Spain. And I came back, and it was a bad experience. And when I came back, this guy said to me, "Did you see Bad News Bears?" And I said, "Yeah, I did. It was really fun." He says, "Could you make a movie like that?" And I said, "Yeah, I could. Yeah, I can do anything, And he says, "Yeah, but can you make it now?" And I said, "I don't know. I mean, it really depends on the script." He says, "We're going to get started on that right away." And that was on Labor Day in 1976, I think, something like that. And we shot 3 weeks later in Connecticut because it was getting cold. We were losing the leaves from the trees.
So you had a 3-week turnaround from idea to cameras up?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And we could only aspire to community theater quality, but that didn't make any difference. It was just with kids that played Little League and with my son, and my daughter was a cheerleader, and you just grabbed anybody that you could. We just had such a great time trying to figure out how to make this silly little movie. And we did. It didn't turn out very well, but when making it, we said, "Geez, I don't know why we're trying to fool around with that. The thing that's really going to take this country by storm is soccer." And everybody said, "Yeah, soccer. That's the one, soccer." And so we tried to do a sort of a sweet family film about some ne'er-do-well orphans who form a soccer team, and they're able to win the big game, and it all works out. And there was a girl goalie masquerading as a boy.
I love that plot.
Yeah.
Later reused in Ladybugs.
Yeah, it was very, very similar. And it was sweet. And but we did it, and it just wasn't, it didn't spark anybody's real interest. And the people...
These films were Here Comes the Tigers, correct? And then this is Manny's Orphans.
Manny's Orphans,
yeah.
Right. And I still like that movie. It's just one of I like the kids, and they're all grown up now, of course. But it was fun making it, and then the picture got optioned, and they were going to use it as a pilot for a TV series at UA. But what I wasn't able to do was to give the investors back the money that they put up for this, and I didn't know what I was going to do next, and that's what led me to decide, well, maybe I go back to trying to make a horror movie.
But what I just discovered looking up Manny's Orphans, written and edited by Steve Miner.
Yes.
And Harry Manfredini did the music.
Yeah. So that's the beginning of the core team.
Everything's connecting.
Yeah, for sure. And I found myself, there are people that I started to work with and that I learned to love and stayed with them. That's what you do.
Yeah. You want to keep everyone together. Yeah. Now, what Friday the 13th was a success right off the bat.
It was.
From your perspective as a young filmmaker at the time, how do you handle that success? Because you didn't come back and do the sequels. I don't know if that was an option, but you went on to do other types of film. You did Spring Break and The New Kids. You were trying to branch out of that. So what lesson did you learn from the success of Friday the 13th?
Well, I was thinking of Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th was never set up to be a great big hit. And it was never, it was just something that we were able to put together in a fairly short period of time. And it turned out to be, a good ride for the audience. And that was fine. And I thought of it sort of like, well, there's my sample reel. Right. I'm really not much different than the kid getting out of film school. So yeah, I can do that. And I was working under the impression that, and by the way, I had access to all the studio heads, and I had no idea it was such a big deal. But you go in and meet these people, and they shake your hand and say, "I'm a big fan of your work," and then they ask you, what do you want to do next, or something like that. And I was thinking that, behind them, their chair there in that filing cabinet, they've got a bunch of scripts that are really good. And they got to be looking for a director to do one of them, and I'd be happy to do that. And of course, no such thing exists even remotely. And what everybody wanted me to say was, what I really want to do is Friday the 13th again, but in a different way. Right. And they say, yeah. And I said stuff like, I'd love to do like a High School Musical. Oh. and I get these looks. Or I said, or what have you got? And, I was so naive, and I really didn't have a mentor at the time, somebody that could tell me how I could have used it to do it differently. But, I didn't think of it as a defining moment. It struck me as just something I had done in 1979, 1980, and whatever I'm going to do this year, I'll do this year, and then next year something else. And that's that's how I went from Mary Higgins Clark to Spring Break, because I wanted to do a sunny, fun movie, and it was sort of like an updated, Annette Funicello movie.
Well, also at that point, sequels weren't even a thing, right? That was right at the beginning of the 80s where like Jaws 2 was coming and we were starting to get sequels and stuff. So, did you even consider doing another Friday the 13th?
Oh, yeah. At that point? What happened, Friday the 13th was very much, physically, it was very, very difficult. We struggled every week to make the payroll, and it was just very, very difficult. And I didn't want to, and I didn't want to go through that again. It wasn't the difficulty of making a movie, but the difficulty of making a movie with people who were very difficult to work with. And
so, were they looking at? Because the sequel idea had not been kind of bridged yet, the 80s was always about, if the first one does well, give them some more money and then make the second one bigger and it'll be bigger. So no one was really offering that yet?
No, they were saying, well, if the first one was good, we'll give them a little money and see what they can get out of the second one, because maybe there's a little name recognition.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't want to. I just didn't want to keep making Friday the 13th over and over again. I would do it very differently today, but at the time, I didn't think that way. I did have this thing though, that when I did Last House on the Left, what I got out of Last House on the Left was I met a lot of people. And they remembered me, and then I would get recommendations. But the recommendations would come off as something like, if you want puke in a bucket and you want it cheap, I got a guy. those would be the kind of opportunities that I would get. And I didn't want to do puke in a bucket. That wasn't my goal. And I saw Friday the 13th as potentially, going in that direction. And I didn't want to, I just wanted to tell other stories.
Sure. A beach film after that difficult experience sounds about right to me.
Yeah.
But then even House, when you do get back to kind of the more horror stuff, it feels drastically different because it is a horror comedy and it is more family oriented.
Oh, for sure. And what we were trying to do with that, is mix genres. which sounds kind of pretentious, but, it was like, could you do a scary movie that's kind of fun and funny? And, Steve Miner phrased it once about, what if Cary Grant did a horror movie? What would it be? And I love that. I love that House turned out to be what it was, and the fact that you could have a poster that says "Ding Dong, You're Dead."
Yeah,
and everybody knew from the very beginning that it wasn't going to be scary.
Well, it's okay. Actually, Elric, our co-host, he was living in New Zealand at the time that House came out on video, and I think he said the tagline was "the scariest movie you'll ever see." So he's always terrified of it. When he finally saw it, he's like, "Oh, this is like fun and funny." Oh, okay.
Now that one you did do a sequel for, and so was that one like you wanted to do a sequel and you were optioning it around, or
no? What happened was that I had learned that if you're going to survive, you have to own stuff. And so when I did House, I set it up with financing and a distribution advance, but I owned the property. And so I had a hit movie, and then I wanted to make another movie and use, exploit the brand, as it were. And that's how I wound up making the next 3 House movies. Trying to figure out how to take advantage of it, and that you have how to make another movie. Mm-hmm. That's really what the game was. Is how do you make another movie? I did that one, but now I feel like I slid all the way down to the bottom of the mountain again. How am I going to make another movie?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I'm always amazed at how House became a franchise because, of course, as a kid, I remember the horror show.
Right, yeah.
So it wasn't until years later that I discovered that was sort of House 3.
Yeah.
I mean, was that always the intention to I mean, I never knew it as House 3, ever.
No.
Until this box set that just came out.
No. It was... House, the first House is something that I'm fascinated by because of it. It's got a very peculiar structure, and it seems to break a whole bunch of rules, but it still works really well.
It holds up really beautifully,
and almost in spite of itself. When Ethan Wiley always said that he wanted to do House 2, that he would write it and work on it. He had written, and he and Steve were the prime movers in putting this horror comedy together, and I think that behind that big push, they had hoped that they would come out with another iconic villain with Big Ben, the zombie from Vietnam, and that worked not at all. But nevertheless, the movie seemed to work well, and anyway. Ethan wanted to do this, and he was a really good guy, and he worked very hard. And I said, "Sure, let's give it a shot." And we tried to give it a shot, and that just sort of it didn't have the the structure was just kind of cockeyed, and so then came the possibility of doing the horror show. That is a very different kind of structure, where it's much more conventional. Scary movie with a bad guy. And I think that in a lot of ways I went to school on the House movies, trying to figure out, what works and what doesn't work, and how to relate to an audience, especially with darker material. And so there was never, I wish I could tell you that there was a grand plan, that I had a vision for 4 movies.
Right.
No, that wasn't ever the case. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you this, though. I've been working on another project this year that I've just finished, but I really want to do House. I want to remake the original House, mm-hmm. which I want to direct, and I want to do it with a female lead. And done a lot of work on it, and it just really works well, and it's got great resonance, and I think it just would be I think it would just be a really, really fun movie to make, mm-hmm. and I think it'd be a fun movie to watch. Yeah. And I think that I could avoid some of the mistakes I made on the other movies, and I think you have a really good time.
Yeah. I mean, with this box set, I feel like we're ready for another house.
You're
Yes.
damn
At
right.
this point, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It has wet the palate again.
Yeah.
Well,
I hope.
one thing I wanted to ask you about is your working relationship with writers, and what I mean by that is, we had Todd Farmer on the show, and prior to writing Jason X for you, he had told us that he was writing various projects for you, and I just picked up the book Slash of the Titans, which is the whole history of Freddy versus Jason. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating. But the thing that I keep hitting on is how you always bring in writers for these ideas that you have, whether they be the franchise one or original ones. Is it important for you to foster new voices, people that you meet along the way in the industry, like young kids that are like, oh, I want to give this kid a break to write something for me? How important is it for you to have that kind of collaboration with writers?
For me, it's very important working with other people to tell the stories. And writer is everything really starts with the writer.
Yeah.
I think that lots of things that I'm a good teacher of a whole bunch of things, but writing, if you learn how the story works in a certain way, you might think that you could explain it to somebody else that maybe had great talents, and that the synergy would exist between what I knew and what this other person knows or intuits, and that together we could get something that would be better than either one of us could do together. It very rarely works. What has to happen is that the writer has to already have that thing, that spark, and then I can really help and guide and shape things, and I can share my mistakes, and that's what I really have to offer is this long catalog of things that really seem like to be a good idea at the time, and you don't have to make those mistakes. I already did it, and I think that young writers are few and far between. It's such a hard craft. Yeah. It's just so hard.
Right. I mean, you strike me as a story-oriented guy because reading I can't believe it took as long as it did to get Freddy versus Jason off the ground. And I know you probably feel the same way.
It really did feel like forever. And I know it was like rights issues and everything else.
If you read this book, it's 10 years, something like 18 screenwriters.
Oh my gosh.
This gentleman named Dustin McNeil, I think. Yeah. It's interesting.
It's on Amazon now because I've been courting buying it. It keeps popping up on my queue. It's like recommended. So it looks fascinating.
And I mean, that's the thing that stood out to me is because it kind of analyzes each of the scripts throughout the years. And the thing was always about getting the story right. And that's it always resonated with me that you were always a story guy in terms of the writing and stuff. I mean, this might be a loaded question, and I hope you can answer it. But in terms of Friday the 13th as of today, and maybe this can apply to Freddy versus Jason as well. Why does it seem to be so hard to crack? Because to me, it doesn't seem like it should be this hard. Like Freddy versus Jason, the final product that came out, I liked it a lot. And it seemed like, we're picking up from where the last ones laid off. That's what the Universal Monsters always did. It's like, well, we buried the Wolfman, so I guess we'll just have to dig him up. And that's that. Right. You know what I mean? But that's my point is like, I think, especially with Friday the 13th, the various versions we've heard about in the last couple of years, people think a lot about it. And is that, in your opinion, do you think that's the case? Are we overthinking what?
Yeah, I think there's some overthinking, but I think that the iconic stature of Jason and Freddy created an extraordinary situation because they were both created as supervillains,
right?
And they start to become protagonists.
It's true. No, we've had this discussion before where it's...
How do you structure a film
around that?
And the fact is you can't structure a film with Jason as a protagonist, really. And so that there are all kinds of problems that go on with Friday, which I really didn't even have a clue until after Friday 9 when I realized what had happened. Excuse me, but when I, after Friday 3, I really didn't pay much attention to the movies. And what had happened is that it became a very dependable sort of blue-collar franchise, in which Jason was going to kick ass. That's what he was going to do. And it was almost like you go to the movie theater and you're going to choose up sides. And it's just, I'll take the big guy with the hockey mask. You can have anybody else. And you see where it takes you. I know that my son described it as saying that ordinarily you'd learn that you want to have somebody at the center of your movie that the audience really likes. But in a horror movie, and particularly in a Friday the 13th movie, you want to create a movie with characters that the audience kind of likes, but would really love to see get whacked.
Right.
so that you're really not trying to build up a big empathy. You're trying to exploit that dynamic, and in his own way, both Freddy and Jason partake of being sort of like revenge of the super nerds. They can come back and they'll always win. And it winds up having kind of two audiences. One is the sort of the Jason or the Freddy audience, and the other is everybody else. So that it, whereas the Jason fan might come to a big kill and he'd go, yeah, and raise up his hands like he was riding on a motorcycle, and his girlfriend is hiding her eyes because she's just shocked and upset. And so you're trying to make it work for both audiences at the same time. So it's a very strange, delicate balance, and people don't want you to mess with their heroes.
Yeah.
And so how do you, I think that I did solve Freddy versus Jason, the structural dynamic, but unfortunately it didn't get made. But it was a terrific learning experience, and I got to work closely with Mike DeLuca, and Mike really understands a whole bunch of stuff, and I was leaning very strongly towards more character-driven action movie, and that I wanted to have the structure of an action movie, not just a bunch of explosions and deaths. And Mike understood more about, I think, the horror side of it than I did. And, when we were finally at the end, I think we were both right, about stuff. And if Mike had stayed at New Line, I'm not sure what movie we would finally have come up with. But he moved on, and Toby Emmerich came in, and he finally did greenlight the movie, and it became something different. And I think that some of its weaknesses became assets with 2020 hindsight, because the movie wasn't real scary. So it became accessible to an audience that would not have enjoyed it otherwise. So it became sort of a great big date movie and just great silly stuff.
Right. Let me tell you, I still enjoy the movie immensely, but it came out on my birthday that year, and that's all I wanted for my birthday was me and like my 20 friends to buy tickets and go see Freddy versus Jason, and we had a blast.
God bless you.
Yeah, I remember.
That's all we needed to do.
I went in college with a group of friends, and it was an absolute trip. We loved it.
I'm curious, and again, this is another slightly loaded question, but would you consider, because of your association with Friday the 13th and the Jason character, who wasn't even that prominent a character in your original film, is the Friday the 13th franchise like kind of both a blessing and a curse for you in terms of, can you look at it in retrospect now and be like, yeah, that's going to be my legacy one way or the other?
Yeah. Yes, I think that Friday has been, I'm not sure that Friday ever was a curse. It was something that I did, and I'm glad I did it. And I never took it too seriously, and I think that would have messed me up. But no, I'm very glad for all the doors that it opened. And we're sitting here, how many years? Almost 40 years later.
Boy.
Talking about this little movie I made out in New Jersey to try to keep the lights on for another 6 months. It's just, and sometimes you do the right things for the wrong reasons. And
Yeah, I love how crazy life can be like that.
Yeah.
I do want to bring up your recent documentary.
Which the trailer made me tear up.
She started to cry.
I started getting weepy watching it.
But
Well, please look over.
there it is. Our mutual friend Blake brought it up before he came on, and you just did a documentary called "The Nurse with the Purple Hair."
There you go.
And I think the story behind this is really terrific. And I love documentaries of this sort anyway. But basically, you've made movies where people die in horrible, horrible ways. But this is a documentary that takes a positive outlook on that death can not be a scary thing.
Yeah, that we all go through it and we all have the same nerves, but that it's important for hospice care nurses to approach it differently and try to make the transition and view it more as a transition and not like everyth's done.
Yeah. So how did this happen? How did this doc come about? Because it seems like it's a very important thing to you.
It is. And my dad died in a hospice right around the time of Friday the 13th. And I was exposed to people in hospice care at that time, and they were stunning, different people than I had ever met. And so I always had a great affection for them and had learned a lot from them. And then as it turned out, I went to this horror convention, a fan expo, and my assistant turned out to be a hospice nurse. And I said, really? Well, tell me about it. And, we started talking. And she had such a bunch of wisdom. And she was young. I mean, she was 32, 33 when I met her. And she dealt with dying people all the time, but she wasn't depressed, and she had a great sense of humor. And so I hooked up with her another 4 or 5 months later and just talked some more. But when I finished talking with her, I said, I was like, I've got a camera, I've got a microphone. We could shoot some of this, and who knows what'll happen to it.
Right.
But my feeling was that there was a great deal of wisdom and a great deal of upside down prejudice about hospice, and that I would love to share it by sharing it with her. And she's very accessible, very, very likable person. And so, you have this, the myth is that hospice is the end. And that we can't do anything for you, so here, I'm afraid we have to put you in hospice. And it isn't that. Is that we all have a certain amount of time. We don't know how much time that is, but we're all going to die and make a transition to the unknown. It happens to everybody. And so that there's a great deal of information out there, a great deal of wisdom out there that we don't know anything about. We know stuff like crazy about childbirth. We know nothing about death. And why is that? I mean, how is it possible that none of us know anything about this, and that some of this, the simplest things would take so much of the pain from families and others around them, that I said, well, let's see if we can find out a little bit more about it. I personally think that we are wired to avoid death, and that it's just such a knee-jerk reaction. So the problem with making a film about hospice is that people just are afraid of it. They don't want to go near it. I said, no, it's okay. Just come. She's a nice person. Just spend a little time. And the movie turned out very, very much, much better than I ever could have hoped, and I'm very proud of it. And I think that it will reach a large audience, but I don't know quite how or when.
Now, I know you've screened it at a couple of conventions, including horror conventions, which seems like an interesting audience. I'm intrigued what the reaction's been.
Well, the reactions have been universally positive, in because you're dealing with such a universal subject. And I did screen it for some friends around a horror convention, but right now we're putting the finishing touches on screening it in was it Famous Film Monsters? There's a
Famous Monsters of Filmland.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No problem.
And in Dallas on Memorial Day. And so it was a convention that they suggested maybe I'd want to come down and, do a fan thing. And I said, how about this? I'll come down and do that. But what if we put together a screening of Nurse with the Purple Hair? Because I'd love to see how it cross-pollinates. And so this becomes a featured part of the free entertainment at the Famous Monsters thing, as well as going to be a place that local hospices and doctors and nurses can come and see the movie, and we'll do a Q&A workshop afterwards and see what comes of it. But it's one of those things that I think is going to find a big home. It's going to start with mostly with nursing schools and medical schools and chaplain schools and like that. It's to just, I asked Michelle is my star. So what would you really like people, to take away from this movie? And she said, be brave enough to have a conversation that matters. And it's like, yeah, let's just, all I want you to do is just talk about it. Like, if your dad's going to die, don't be afraid to talk to him about it. Or talk to your doctor about it. Talk to a nurse. But talk about this and get just light a candle in this dark room and light another candle. And what happens is, of course, you still die. It's not, none of this is a way of saying that you don't die, but it's to take a whole bunch of the pain and anxiety off your shoulders and off the shoulders of the families around you. So if the families around a dying person know what the dying person is going through, then they're not as wigged out. They can be with the person rather than worrying about things that can't be dealt with. Right. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, and I mean, the irony is that I think a lot of horror fans are big softies at heart.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I mean, I'm tearing up while you're talking about it.
Yeah, me too here. I'm fanning my eyes right now, guys.
So this is going to, is this available?
Yeah, it's going to be on Amazon next week.
Next week? Oh my God. Oh, okay, great.
Coming.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And you can go to thenurseWithThePurpleHair.com and you can also get it there.
All right.
And,
well, this is terrific. And Shauna, I really appreciate you coming down and giving us some of your time to talk about a little bit of everything.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
What's up next for you? More documentaries or what are you thinking about?
I don't know. I think I'm looking forward to directing something besides the documentary. But I've been... I've been looking at House, and I think House is something that I'd really like to direct. But the Friday the 13th TV series is still percolating, and I got a very good handle on how we want to do it, and how and CBS and CW both said, "Yeah, that's good." And I think I don't quite know what I'll do there, but I think I'm really looking forward to that, because it's, again, taking this thing that appears one way, and then you say, you can do it this way too, and this could really keep it interesting.
And horror has really had a resurgence over the past several years on television, with a lot of the titles that everyone came to know and love really kind of being reinvented, but in smart ways.
That's the thing, is that, you need a really smart showrunners. And I think the thing about Friday the 13th as a TV franchise, it had a problem that, how the hell do you deal with Jason? What's he going to come out of the woods every week and smash another teenager against a tree, and nobody's going to notice, or nobody knows who did it?
Doesn't he run out of teens eventually?
Yeah, he's got to at some point.
Each season, he gets a new batch of teens, and they just keep busting them in.
But
I would still watch that show.
Yeah, but not for very long. But what happens is that, and plus, you have to service the fans. I mean, you can't ignore them. And Friday the 13th, at least in part, is going to be about Jason. So how do you make sense out of all of the contradictory, stories that are out there between Jason going to space and coming back, and Freddy versus Jason and the other things? And the assumption is this, that Crystal Lake is a town that really exists. And that's some long time ago, they had a serial killer named Jason Voorhees. And then some Hollywood creep comes out and he makes sort of this exploitation horror movie called Friday the 13th. And then they make another one and another one, and it crushes the town. The town becomes the place that Jason built and so on. And the stuff that happened, they know what really happened. And the rest is just sort of Hollywood lore. And there are people there that lived through it, and they'll tell you what really happened. And so that what you can do is you can set up Crystal Lake is more or less like Pleasant, the town in Jaws.
Yeah.
Amity.
Amity Island.
Yeah.
Pleasantville. Wrong movie.
Good movie, but yeah.
Yeah, but the wrong movie.
We'll go
Amityville.
Amityville.
And so that you
Amity.
have the town with all of its prime movers in the town, but the town is located in an area that will allow for Jason to exist, in whatever form, but other things as well. I would describe it as a place that if Scully and Mulder wandered into this county, they never would have left.
Yeah.
There's just so much weird shit going on.
So the serial killer was like the least of their worries.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff, and then you're trying to balance all the human stuff, and then you have the family at the core of it, but you're not following Jason around. It's the town and all the town politics, and it's just such a rich palette.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward.
TV, it could totally work. Things like Bates Motel, The Exorcist did a great job, Hannibal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm all for it.
Let's do it.
Let's look out for it.
Make it happen, sir.
My job.
All right, Sean. Once again, thanks so much for coming down and giving us
I
time.
appreciate it. I appreciate both of you, your support.
Yeah, of course. We look forward to whatever you have in the future.
Well,
we will tell people about it right
We
here.
should remake this movie called People Who Own the Dark. I've heard really good things about it.
Good. Has anybody written an article about it or something that I could...
Potentially. I think there might be a few out there.
All right,
Thank you
guys.
so much for joining us.
See you soon.
All right, take care, guys.
All right.